Yes, my name is John, and we are going to get through as much sharpening stuff as possible in the next little bit. Because you guys here are using both double bevel and single bevel knives, we're going to try and cover both of them. And I think the easiest place to start is, well, actually, let's back up a little bit. The way that I like to teach sharpening is this. Much like you guys, I worked in kitchens for a long time, and I learned sharpening kind of on the job. Where you just kind of figure shit out and you watch a YouTube video and you ask your coworkers like how to do stuff, and people will tell you things and you try to implement those things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and it's because no one ever really takes the time to explain the how and why behind what's going on. And it wasn't until I had a chance to go train with craftsmen in Japan, which I do now every year, that someone could sit there and explain to me the how and why behind everything that I was doing, and that was a game changer. I think once you understand those kind of basic fundamental concepts of sharpening and you have a way to critically think and problem solve, sharpening becomes a lot easier. And that's not to say that you won't make mistakes. You will make lots of mistakes. But the goal is that you can recognize the mistakes and that you'll know what to do about them when you figure out what they are. And so that is the way that we're going to teach sharpening today. So we are going to jam in as much of the fundamental concept stuff as possible. And then I'm going to try and demonstrate as much of that as possible. I'm going to try and show you what mistakes look like what it looks like when you make them, what they actually look like when you're observing the knife, and what to do about them. And then I'll try and cover whatever else we can kind of sneak in there in terms of knife skills and care and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. The main difference that you need to be cognizant of first and foremost is whether you have a single bevel knife or a double bevel knife. And it's kind of a misnomer because single bevel knives have bevels on both sides and they're sharpened on both sides. They're just sharpened differently on both sides. And the easiest way, I think, to figure that stuff out is this. When you look at your knife, if you look at one side and then you look at the other side and they look pretty much the same, that's a double bevel knife. Now, the bevel might be larger on one side than another. That's okay. That's asymmetrical. Asymmetry is a part of double bevel knives. It's not that crazy. But if it looks generally the same, that's going to be a double bevel knife. If you look at one side and then you look at the other side and they look drastically different, as you can see here, like not at all the same, that is generally a single bevel knife. And so figuring out which one you have is going to be an important part of sharpening it correctly. If you try and employ the kind of sharpening techniques that you would use on a single bevel knife to a double bevel knife, you're going to fuck it up, and vice versa. If you try and sharpen a double bevel knife like a single bevel knife, you're going to fuck it up. So that is something to be aware of first and foremost. In terms of the basic shapes of knives that you'll see, I think we all know like all the kind of double bevel stuff. You have a big knife like a chef's knife, which Japanese people call a gyuto. Petty knife, which is a smaller knife like utility knife. There's paring knives, there's santokus, nakiris are little square ones. For single bevel knives, there are three main kinds of single bevel knives that exist, and they all have highly specific purposes. So, for example, this type of knife is called the yanagiba. And there are variations of it. There's one that's got like a more kind of rectangular tip called the takobiki. There's stylistic things of them. But a yanagiba is a knife for slicing raw boneless protein. Sometimes you can get away with some cooked stuff, but in general, it's for raw boneless protein. So once the fillet has been removed, if you're skinning something, if you're doing a crudo, sashimi, yanagiba is the knife for that. The other knife that you guys likely use the hell out of here is called a deba. And the deba looks something like this. And these are knives geared specifically towards fish butchery. And there are a couple of main techniques that you'll see with fish butchery. There's sanmai oroshi, which is the kind of technique that you use for, like more normal fish, like snapper and bass and stuff like that. And what you're doing is you're removing the head and then the fillet from each side. So by the time you're done, you end up with the two fillet sides and the center bone. And that's the 3 sheets of the sanmai oroshi. The other kind of cutting is called gomai oroshi, and that's for flat fish. And you just end up with 5 pieces. You end up with like belly, loin, bones, belly, loin in that way. But all of that stuff is done with this. The deba is also used for breaking down the bones. So like if you're going to make a stock, you can use the heel of deba to chop stuff up and throw it into a pot. In Japan, they're often used for splitting fish heads in half. They suck for poultry. A lot of people buy them and they're like, I'm going to break down chicken with this stuff. Chicken bones and fish bones are not the same. You're going to fuck up your knife, so don't use it on poultry. This is for breaking down fish. The other one was for slicing fish. That's what that stuff is for. The last type of knife, which I don't think that you guys would use here that much, is called an usuba. And an usuba sometimes will have like more of a squared off tip, but it's a single bevel knife geared towards vegetable work. Not general purpose vegetable work. It's not the knife you pick up to like dice and chop and, I don't know, make mirepoix. but it is the knife that works for specific kinds of techniques within Japanese cuisine. So you'll see katsuramuki is like the rotary peeling of stuff. You've seen people take like daikon and make sheets of daikon with stuff, or sengiri is a type of julienne technique that's used. So the usuba is for that kind of stuff. Funny enough, when I was cooking in Japan, it was the knife that I used the most. And then when I came back to cooking in Western restaurants here, I tried to use it as much as possible, and it just fucking sucks in Western restaurants because it's extremely brittle, and we work with a lot of acidic foods, and it steers a lot when you cut. So there are a lot of techniques involved in using this well. And if you are curious more about that stuff, let me know, and I'm happy to go over that. But today we're going to focus mostly on sharpening yanagiba because that's similar enough to a deba to make sense, and I know you guys are all using debas. And then the gyuto because it's just a good general purpose chef's knife that we can focus on. So if you go to your packet and you're looking towards the back of it, I think on page 5, you'll see that we have like little drawings of the yanagiba and the deba and the usuba. I am a really, really, really bad artist. A lot of the stuff in here is going to look like shit, and it's not going to be to scale, but it's going to get the point across, and that I am good at. All right, so again, we're going to go through a bunch of this stuff as we go. So when do you sharpen, right? Like how dull does stuff have to be before you sharpen? How often do you need to sharpen? There's no really good answer to that. So the basic thing that I will tell people is when your knife is not working the way that you want, sharpen it, right? It doesn't have to be anything more than that, but you do have to be mindful as you work, right? If you're doing something like cutting, I don't know, like onions, or you're going through fish skin, and all of a sudden it's just not feeling the way you want, maybe that's the time to sharpen. I think as a professional, you're going to end up doing it much more frequently than you otherwise would, even to the point where you don't want your knife to get dull. Not because dull is bad, but because you are looking to achieve consistency in what you do every day. Like that is what cooking is, right? We try and be as consistent as possible. And so having our tools be a part of that consistency is really helpful so that you know that your knife is the same level of sharpness every time you pick it up. That is going to help you be more effective at what you do. And you're not going to sit there spending time like fighting against your knife with stuff. It's going to work the way that you expect it to work every single time. So, for instance, when I used to cook, I was really obsessive about stuff. You don't need to be this crazy, but this was my workflow. I would come in the morning. My knife would have been freshly sharpened from the evening before. I would prep out all my stuff for lunch, right? Right before lunch service, I would eat family meal really quick, and then I would touch up my knife. And by touch up, I mean really just like barely touch the edge on a finishing stone. So I kept a third pan with a finishing stone near my station, and that was my touching up, right? Then I would get through lunch service. I would touch up my knife. I would start prepping out for dinner. I would take my little break. I would come back, eat family meal real quick, touch up my knife, work through dinner service, and at the end of the day, I would sharpen my knife again, and I would repeat that process every single day. Japanese knives are a lot thinner and harder than their Western counterparts, and they do not respond well to honing steels. And so this was a way for me to keep a high level of performance throughout the day. And so I'll show you a few different techniques as we go through this that you can use for touching up. But that was the way I did stuff, so I knew that every time that I picked up my knife, if I was going to cut chives, those chives were going to look fucking great. If I was going to cut basil, that basil was going to look great because it was the same level of thing every day. So when do you sharpen? When it's not working the way you want. Be mindful, pay attention to what's going on. There's not going to be a single right way to do a lot of the things we're talking about. You're going to have to be introspective and decide, what am I looking for in my knife? Do I want it to feel this way? Do I want it to feel that way? Is it sharp enough for me? Is it not? So please, pay attention to what's going on when you're doing stuff. Before we begin sharpening, the first thing that we want to do is inspect our knife. We want to see what's going on with it, right? And there are a number of things that you have to inspect. Beyond the very cursory, like just looking at it and being like, oh, look, there's a chip. There are a few other things that you want to do. So you definitely want to start there. Just look at your knife, look at the front, look at the back. Are there scratches you want to deal with? Is there a chip you want to deal with? Is the profile all fucked up? What's going on with it, right? Once you identify some of those things, then we'll figure out what kind of sharpening we're going to do. We also want to check for straightness. Having a blade that is not straight and then go into sharpening is going to exacerbate that problem of not being straight. So it's important to look at our knives in a number of different ways. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to sight down the spine. So we're going to line it up with one eye, and we're going to look all the way down the spine, slowly lifting the tip up as we go and moving our focal point from the heel towards the tip. And we're going to do that on the spine, and then we're going to flip it over and do the same thing on the edge. Sometimes it's helpful to have something that's a straight line in the background, so you can pick like the corner of a wall or the door or something like that, so that you have a reference point as you're looking to make sure that things look straight. Once we look at it that way, we're going to point it towards our face, and we're going to do the same thing from the tip looking towards the heel, both along the edge and along the spine. If there are bends, they need to be fixed, and we generally fix those with a tool like this. I don't recommend that you do this yourself, so if your knife is bent, come and bug me. I will help you out with that. There are a number of ways we do it, but this is normally the way. So we'll identify where the bend is, and then we'll slowly work up to the apex, and then away from the apex with pressure to bend it in the opposite direction. So that's like right-left bends and maybe like weird handle installations. Like the knife might be straight, but it might be coming out of the handle at an odd angle. You can see all of those things based on what we just looked at. You also want to look for twisting. Twisting can be another issue. And so with twisting, you're going to hold it up right around eye level, and you're going to try and line the edge up in between the spine. And if the edge kind of extends up above or down below the spine in one area but not in the other, that may indicate that you have some kind of like twisting with your knife. Again, needs to be fixed before you sharpen. So we're going to look at it like this, and then we're going to flip it over this way. And this multiple perspective thing really helps you see a lot more. And then the same thing, we're going to look from the spine. We're going to see, does the edge come up or down beyond what the spine looks like from both sides. So again, starting from a point of visual inspection with your knife, making sure everything looks good. If the knife looks good and you've identified what you want to deal with, for example, like it just needs basic sharpening or there's a chip in it that needs to be dealt with, then you can start to formulate what you want to do in terms of your game plan of sharpening. Also, while you're cutting, try and be mindful of what's going on. Does your knife steer in one direction, or does it cut straight? Does it wedge in foods? Does it chip a lot? Does it move through foods easily? The more information that you have like that, the better job you can do at figuring out what kind of sharpening needs to occur. Everyone's with me so far? All right, cool. In a complete sharpening setup, there are 5 things that you're going to want. You're going to want a coarse stone, a medium grit stone, a finishing stone, something to hold the stones in place, and something to keep them flat. Some of those things are absolutely necessary, and some of those things are just kind of nice to have. So the necessary items are something to hold the stone in place, something to keep it flat, and a medium grit stone. Those are like absolutely necessary things to have. Medium grit stones will range from around 800 grit to around 2000 grit. And the idea is that they're fast enough to deal with minor chips and nicks and leave you with an edge that you can do pretty much anything you need to do in a kitchen with. So if you have just one stone, that's the stone to get. Holding the stone in place, it can be like this fancy ass thing that I have here, but it can also just be like a damp towel on the edge of your countertop or some cabinet liner. What it needs to do is it needs to stop your stone from sliding around while you're sharpening. Seems pretty obvious. And it either needs to position you in an area where you have knuckle clearance, i.e. the edge of your countertop like this if you're right-handed, or like this if you're left-handed, or in this case, provide height so that you don't have to worry about knuckle clearance, right? That makes sharpening possible to do. If your knuckles are scraping along the countertop, it's really fucking hard to do a good job at sharpening. So holding the stone in place is pretty important. Keeping the stone flat is also really important. The stones are usually some kind of binding agent and some kind of abrasive mixed together like making pottery, but with shit in it, right? And as you're sharpening, you're wearing away the binding agent, the thing that holds it all together, and exposing fresh abrasive. But as we use the stone, we don't use the entire stone surface perfectly evenly, and so some parts of it wear more quickly than other parts of it, and it leaves us with stones that often look like half pipes. It's very, very, very difficult to maintain a consistent angle on some shit that looks like a half pipe. So we take something like, I use a diamond flattening plate like this. You can use the sidewalk, sandpaper, another stone, doesn't really matter. We use something to rub on the stone and wear down those high spots until it's nice and even and flat again. And that gives us then a good medium on which we can maintain a consistent angle and do a good job at sharpening. Cool? So those are the necessary ones. Medium stone, holding it in place and keeping it flat. And again, as I mentioned, like, you don't have to spend a lot of money on stuff. I've definitely flattened stones with the sidewalk or like the stairs at this one restaurant I worked. There's a really smooth spot now from where I flattened my stone on it. So, it doesn't matter what it is, but you'll figure out like budget relative to convenience, what's going to work well for you. If you're swimming in the money, buy all the fancy shit. If you're broke as fuck, use the sidewalk. Figure out where you need to be. So that's the medium stone, the holding it in place and keeping it flat. The other 2 stones are coarse stones and finishing stones. Finishing stones are generally the second thing that I would recommend someone buy, and finishing stones will be any stone that's around 3,000 grit or up. But for kitchen knives, we're going to look at a range from around 3,000 grit to around 8,000 grit. Much like sandpaper, the higher the number, the smaller the abrasive, right? When you start to go up in the higher grit ranges, the abrasive might be so fine that you lose tactile feedback along the edge. There's no bite. And so when you cut through like thick-skinned foods like tomatoes or bell peppers, eggplant, instead of digging in, it kind of like skids over the surface. When you do fish skin also, because you guys are breaking down fish with the Deba. When it's really, really smooth or slippery, it doesn't dig in the way you want. You get no tactile feedback from what's going on. So that 3,000 to 8,000 grit range, and honestly, usually like around 4,000 to 6,000, gives you more of that, gives you bite. So when you cut tomatoes, it digs in. When you cut through fish skin, you can feel what's going on, and there's some aggressive bite to it. You don't want it to be so much that it's like a serrated knife tearing at your food, but it is helpful. So finishing stones provide additional refinement, so they give you a smoother cutting feel. Aesthetically, things get shinier. Doesn't really matter, but it's like a cool side effect. But the biggest benefit that the finishing stones provide is that they make the process of burr reduction and removal a lot easier. As we sharpen, we're going to focus on this thing called burr formation, and then we're going to go through burr reduction and burr removal. We'll get to that in a little bit. Finishing stones, because they are less aggressive, they make that process a lot easier. And so finishing stones will do that for you.
So yeah, your two keywords are bite, right?
Yes.
Like, does everybody understand what that feels like? It's kind of like when you're pulling your knife on something and like you feel that.
It like aggressively digs in versus like either just falling through stuff with no feeling or like skidding on the surface, right?
And then burr.
And then the burr we'll touch on in a little bit. So medium finishing. The last thing that I would buy would be a coarse stone. And ironically, the coarse stone is probably the most useful thing that you'll have. But coarse stones are there to get shit done quickly, right? They are much, much, much quicker cutting. And so that helps you deal with larger chips. That helps you deal with when your knives are super fucking dull. It helps you deal with a process called thinning, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. But the point is that it removes a lot more metal a lot more quickly. And as you can imagine, that speeds up your sharpening process, and it makes things like chips much less of a big issue that you have to deal with. The downside of finishing stones, other than the fact that they always feel like shit and they wear much more quickly, is that every mistake that you make will show up much more quickly and in a much more severe manner. So I don't generally recommend people start there because unless you feel really comfortable with your sharpening, you're probably going to fuck some stuff up. So even taking more time on a medium grit stone, though it may not be as pleasant to spend that much time on something, will be helpful because you can see the mistakes coming before it's too late, and you can do something about them. And again, that's what we're focused on here today, training your eyes, giving you a sense of understanding so you understand what's going on in front of you when you're sharpening. So coarse stone, medium grit stone, finishing stone, something to hold it in place, something to keep it flat. Cool? You don't have to buy fancy stones. Really, like simple stones work really well. Skill and technique matters more than anything else. There are three main kinds of sharpening stones that exist out there, and each one of them will have different kind of care or use requirements. There are ceramic stones, resinoid-based stones, and magnesia-based stones. Ceramic stones are stones that are made exactly like pottery. Like you mix together some kind of ceramic binding agent, some abrasive, you fire it in a big kiln. They tend to be porous, and when you use them, they need to be soaked in water prior to use. And you want to soak them until bubbles stop coming out, until the stone is fully saturated. Recently learned a really cool thing. Instead of totally submerging the stone in water, if you submerge most of the stone in water and leave the top surface out, it allows the air to escape much more quickly, and the stone will soak much, much, much faster than if you submerge it entirely in water, in which case it has water pressure all around it and keeps some of the air inside. What's up?
How much of the stone should you leave?
Literally, as long as just the top surface of it is not submerged, it will work faster. But you can submerge the entire thing, which is what I've done for years, up until maybe like a year ago.
Will you then flip it? Like,
No, you don't have to flip it at all. You get capillary action. It's the same way that fountain pens work. The really tiny pores have less surface tension, and so they draw water upwards. So yeah, as long as the stone is like mostly submerged, the water will soak all the way through to the top. Capillary action is cool as fuck. All right, so
and I'd like to say a couple words on capillary.
yeah, you should. I love fountain pens, so it's a thing for me. Like I am a person who will find hobbies that I can get dorky about, and just go to like the fucking end of the earth with that shit. So yeah.
We'll talk after.
Yeah, I'm game. All right, so the cool thing about ceramic stones is the binding agent is also really hard and aggressive, and it contributes to the cutting speed of the stone. They tend to provide really good, grippy, tactile feel, and they are the most common kind of stone out there. So the vast majority of stones you'll see will be like that. So they need to be soaked prior to use until they are fully saturated, at which point you can use them. You'll splash water on them as you go. This is really stupid, but if you're at home and you want to store it, but you don't have a lot of space, I often recommend to my customers to put it in the top tank of the toilet because the water is clean. It cycles through all the time, so you don't have to worry about changing water all the time because mold and algae can be disgusting. It minimizes the amount of water that your toilet is using, so you get to be slightly more eco-friendly, and it's not in your way. So, you know, think about it. See how disgusted you feel with that. All right, so I'm going to flip over to magnesia stones because they are almost the polar opposite in every way. Magnesia-based stones are set at room temperature. There's no oven firing in them at all, and they are not porous. That means that they do not absorb water. So when you use them, you can just splash water on them and start sharpening, which is really, really convenient. However, they cannot be soaked. Soaking them will cause them to kind of disintegrate and fall apart. Like, they can be exposed to water, but they can't be totally soaked in water. So they tend to be really convenient if you're looking for something you can just like quickly throw some shit on and start sharpening. The downside of them is that they can crack, and they tend to feel harder, more slippery, or glass-like. So they don't provide the best tactile feedback, but they are extremely convenient. All right, those are magnesia-based stones. Resinoid-based stones kind of fit somewhere in the middle. They're fired at low-temperature ovens, and they're kind of almost like a plasticky material. Resinoid-based stones are often sold as splash and go stones, and you can totally use them that way. However, they feel a little bit chalky, and they still do absorb a little bit of water. My experience has been that permanently soaking resinoid-based stones is the fucking best. However, soaking and drying them causes them to crack. So if you soak it, you got to leave that shit in water forever. And if you do ever want to dry it, you have to slow down the drying process because when it dries out, the outside loses water more quickly than the inside, and it contracts around the water that's still flush, or the center that's still flush with water, and stress fractures form. Resinoid-based stones are really cool because they provide the highest level of polish and the most smooth, even-looking finishes, and they provide a really creamy, almost like luxurious sharpening experience. Like, it's a really smooth, fun experience. It's not slippery. So I like that because we sharpen professionally. Like, people fucking pay us money to do that, so we have to make stuff look nice when we're sharpening for people. And resinoid-based stones will often do a great job at that. I tend to look at them in the more finishing range of things. But the permanent soaking thing can be tricky for some people, and the inability to like soak and dry repeatedly is a little bit tricky. If you ever want to, you can come over to our shop, which is located on Wilshire and Beverly Hills, and you can try them all out. You can try every fucking stone that we have there, and you can see how it works for you. You can see what you like or don't like, what works well for you, what doesn't work well for you, and you can bug us with questions about sharpening too. But those are the three main kinds of stones that exist out there. So, any questions so far? Cool. We talked about stone fixtures a little bit before. It's really important that you are, you guys, all right, sweet. It's really important that you're paying attention to stone flatness. So if your stone feels or looks not flat, that is generally the time that you want to flatten it. That doesn't mean you have to do it every single time that you sharpen, but it does mean that you want to be cognizant of that as you're sharpening. And you know, you can look at that a lot of ways. Like, you can take a reference plate and kind of lay it across the stone and see what's going on. But often, if it's dished enough, you can just look at it and you see that it's dished. When you are flattening it, what you want to do is grab a pencil and you'll draw a grid pattern along the stone. And then you'll take your stone fixer. I'm not going to do it on this because these two don't mix well. And you'll rub it like this on your stone. You can use like long strokes, whatever. What you'll see is that the pencil that you've drawn in will disappear on the high spots and will remain on the low spots. And you can continue doing that until all the pencil is gone and you know your stone is flat. Periodically, while you're doing that, you'll rotate your stone. And the reason that you'll do that is that we have a tendency to apply more pressure in one plane than another. So, for example, you might be applying more pressure this way or this way, but by rotating, you can mitigate that so you have a nice flat surface as you go through. And when you're done, you can either chamfer off the edges or round them over in an ideal world. There are a couple of reasons for that. The edges, when they are not chamfered, tend to crack a little bit more. But more importantly, when your hand runs into a really sharp edge like that while you're sharpening, that shit hurts. So don't let that happen to you. It sucks. Ceramic stones, the outsides tend to be harder than the inside, so those parts also wear a little bit more slowly. So by rounding it over, you can mitigate those parts sticking up a little bit further and causing weird scratch patterns on the blade. So flatten it, round over the edges, call it a day. All right. Honing steels. Don't use them. Just don't use them if you can avoid using them. Honing steels are really, really effective for German knives or like softer steel knives. Most materials, all materials, when you exert pressure against them, they go through various stages. Initially, you will see elastic deformation. That's where things bend and then pop back into place. When you cross the materials threshold for that, you get into plastic deformation. That's where things bend and stay bent, and beyond that, fracturing. As things get thinner and or harder, their range for plastic and elastic deformation becomes much more narrow, right? So German knives are generally thick and soft, and when you use them against hard cutting boards and all kinds of other bullshit that you do with them, they tend to plastically deform. And the honing rods are really great because they allow you to realign the edge, ergo applying plastic deformation in your favor to get a nice, keen edge again. Japanese knives are a lot thinner and a lot harder, so their range for elastic and plastic deformation is much more narrow, and when you exert lateral pressure across the edge, because the edge is the thinnest part and because they are rather hard, they tend to be damaged or chipped. So in lieu of using a honing rod, we can use a stropping motion on our finishing stone, and that's a quick way to touch up. And again, I'm going to show all this stuff in a little bit. If you do have to use a honing rod, like you have a Forstner or something like that you just need to use that stuff with, there are good techniques for doing that. So instead of just doing the stuff in the air like this, what you'll do is you put a towel down and you take the tip of the honing rod and you stick it down into the towel and you go like this on either side of it. And what's nice about that is that instead of having multiple pieces that are moving at the same time where you can't control pressure, now you have one thing you can control pressure, and it's much easier to gauge and see the angle and be consistent in what you're doing. However, again, if you can avoid it, stropping on your finishing stone will be a much more effective way to touch up your knife. Cool. Went over that. Tall, dense foods. You guys cut like a lot of root vegetables and stuff like that here? Not so much, right? All right. Well, if you do, there are two main schools of thought with respect to that. One is that you get the thickest, most durable knife, and you rely on the heft and resistance to damage, and just kind of power through that shit. The other is you get the absolute thinnest fucking knife you can find, and you rely on physics to do its job. The thinner knives will displace less material, ergo requiring less force to move through stuff, so you don't get as much wedging, the foods don't crack at the bottom. However, they can be much more prone to damage, and so you want to minimize hitting really hard things, big bones, frozen foods, seeds, nuts. Hitting things with excessive force, like hard board contact, like when you julienne onions, or kind of like Fruit Ninja type shit that people are doing. And then most importantly, you want to minimize or eliminate lateral force exerted across the edge for exactly the same reasons I was talking about with the honing steel earlier. So twisting, rotating, side-to-side movements, but even rocking motions where the edge stays in contact with the board as you move around stuff, those things can all damage your knife. So instead, we use kind of a thrust cutting motion. So instead of doing like this kind of thing or this kind of thing, we're doing this kind of thing. And that way, as I'm moving across stuff, my edge is coming entirely off my cutting board, and I'm not exerting any lateral force against the edge. So with like herbs, you can roll them up like a cigar, shift nod them, rotate your bunch 90 degrees, shift nod again. You haven't exerted any lateral force against the edge, and you also have a nice, more consistent product that way. All right, body positioning. So when we start sharpening, we are going to use the same body positioning that's really effective for cutting. People don't talk about body positioning, so we're going to do that right now. Instead of squaring off with your cutting board like this, what you're going to do, anyone left-handed? Yeah? Are you good at translating lefty stuff? All right. Do you want me to show stuff lefty also?
It's okay.
Okay. If you do at any point, let me know. And it's just going to look slightly more stupid than I normally do. But we're going to make it work. So instead of just squaring off with your cutting board like this, what you're going to do is take a step back with your right foot, or in your case, your left foot, and it's going to shift your body to the side a little bit. For cutting, this is also really important because it gives you much better range of motion for your arm. You can lean down and look and gauge cut thickness without being as far off balance. And so it's a more comfortable way to be. It also moves your work area towards the lower right-hand corner of your board, so your knuckles overhang the floor instead of overhanging the board, so you don't have knuckle clearance issues as much. So if you're working with like a really narrow knife, you're not smashing your knuckles into your cutting board. It's the same kind of body positioning that we're going to use for sharpening. So when we come up to our sharpening stone, we're going to square off, and then we're going to take a slight step back, almost like a boxing stance, shift your body to the side a little bit. So that is the body positioning that we are going to use. With respect to grips, all of our grips for sharpening are going to start from a really basic pinch grip. And this is going to sound sad saying this to professional cooks, but we're going to go over what a pinch grip is because people fuck it up like all the time. It's really sad, actually. So with the pinch grip, what we're going to do is we're going to take the pad of our thumb and the left side of the knuckle of our index finger, right? And we're going to take those two things, and they're going to pinch way up here on the blade. Our middle finger is going to fit down into this area, which is called the choil of the knife right here. So our pinch and our middle finger are going to go like this, and our last two fingers are going to wrap ever so lightly around the handle. All of your grip is here and here. None of your grip is here. You don't want like a Kung Fu death grip on your knife. You want like a loose, relaxed grip as you go. This puts your wrist on the top side of the knife, so you have much better range of motion with your wrist as you do stuff. It's easier to slice stuff. So this is the pinch grip that we are going to use when we start our sharpening. When we are sharpening the first side of our knife, which in our case is going to be the right side of our knife, or the left side in your case, we are going to start from the pinch grip. We're going to move our index finger up to the spine and our thumb down towards the heel. This is the kind of grip that we're going to use on the first side of the knife. All right. When we start sharpening the second side of the knife, which is going to be this back side here, the left side for us, the right side for her, we are going to again start from the pinch grip, but this time we're going to move our thumb to the spine and our index finger down towards the heel. All right, this is what's going to allow us to do this kind of sharpening. Some people like to switch hands when they sharpen. So for example, you might sharpen like this, and then you'll switch hands like this. You can do it. It's fine. Doesn't really matter. It's not how I do stuff. It's not how most of the people that I train with do stuff. But there's nothing absolutely wrong with it at all. I'm really bad with my left hand. Like I have to do left-handed sharpening often for customers. That shit is hard. If you're good at switching hands, you're ambidextrous, great. More power to you. Knock yourself out. I'm not going to do that today because I don't want to look like a fool. But you can if you want to. All right. So now let's go to our images that we have here. The first 4 images, they're going to cover double bevel stuff. The last 4, second to last 4 images, they're going to cover single bevel stuff. And the very last page is going to go over some stuff that we can use Sharpie for that will help us improve our sharpening in a pretty substantial way. So here we have like a cross section of the knife. So imagine the knife is just coming through the paper like this. When our knife is dull, whether it's like chipped or something like that, this is the base area where we're beginning our sharpening, right? So our sharpening is going to look something like this. On our first stone, whether that's our core stone or our medium grit stone, we are going to sharpen on the first side at whatever angle we choose, which we'll talk about in a second, until we form a burr. Are you guys familiar with what a burr is? Does anyone know what a burr is? No? Yeah? Yes. All right. So metal likes to stay connected to itself. So when we're sharpening on one side, a lot of metal gets ground away. But on the opposite side that you're sharpening, a little bit of metal will flip up and over. And this little flippy piece of metal over here is called a burr. And a burr is really, really important in our sharpening because it tells us a lot of things. One, it tells us that we're actually sharpening the edge of our knife, right? If you're not getting a burr, chances are you're not hitting the edge of your knife. It's not going to get sharp. 2, it tells us that we're removing fatigued steel from our edge. So all day you bang your knife against stuff, metal gets fatigued, doesn't want to hold up anymore, kind of like a paper clip when you bend it back and forth a bunch. We want to get rid of the tired, messed up steel, and we want to expose fresh new steel that will get sharp and stay that way for a long time. And 3, we want to make sure that the burr is the same size all the way through from the heel to the tip. That tells me I'm removing the same amount of metal at each place along the blade so that the shape of my knife stays consistent over time. If you form a large burr in one area and a small burr in another area, the shape of your knife is going to change because you're removing more metal in one place than another, right? So we want to make sure that the burr is consistent and even from heel to tip. And we are going to do that by feeling for it. We are going to use our index finger and maybe our middle finger, but our index finger is what's actually important because our index finger has more nerve endings than any other digit that you have in your body. If we sharpen, for example, this side here, I'm going to place my thumb on the side that I sharpen, and I'm going to take my index finger and my middle finger, and I'm going to run them along the edge of the blade like this. I'm running them along the side. I'm not running them over the edge. I'm sure as hell not going towards the edge, and I'm not moving laterally at all because I don't want to cut myself. So, again, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to feel all the way through from the heel to the tip. I'm going to make a burr through the course of the sharpening here, so you guys will all have a chance to feel what that's like, and so everyone knows for sure, like, yes, I have a burr. If you're not sure, like if you're sitting and you're like, I don't know, do more. Like, just keep sharpening until you're 100% sure that you have a burr. As you get better at sharpening, you'll be able to form smaller burrs and waste less metal, but it's more important that you get good results than it is that you're like wasting the absolute minimum amount of metal in the beginning of sharpening. So again, I can place my thumb here and feel on this side, or alternatively, I can place my thumb on this side and I can feel on this side. And I'm going to do that all the time. So if I sharpen here, I'm going to put my thumb there, I'm going to touch this side, and if I sharpen here, I'm going to put my thumb here, I'm going to feel that side. So as we go through our sharpening, we're going to sharpen on our first stone, one side, even and consistent burr from heel to tip, then the other side, even and consistent burr from heel to tip. So our process is going to be coarse, coarse, medium, medium, fine, fine, right? At the end, we're going to have an edge that is potentially very sharp, like it might cut paper and shave hair and do all kinds of cool shit, but it's not going to be stable. It's not going to be very strong, and it's because we have this floppy piece of metal hanging off the edge of it. Again, that floppy piece of metal can be very, very, very sharp. So we go through some additional steps to first reduce the burr in size, second, weaken its connection to the edge as much as possible, and then third, remove it. And what I like to do for that is a stropping motion. Have you guys ever seen barbers with the straight razors and they have the leather and they do this shit with it? That motion is called stropping. And stropping is a full-length edge-trailing stroke. So, for example, this is a stropping motion. I'm covering the entire length of the knife, one side, one side, one side, one side. So I'm alternating. And in doing that, the burr gets bent back and forth a whole bunch, and it makes its connection to the edge weaker, and it makes it smaller, so that eventually I can remove it. There are a lot of different ways to remove it. I feel like this is my super cheat trick of the century. The blue non-scratch sponge. This shit is awesome. Blue non-scratch sponges are really cool because there's no abrasive on the blue side of it. It's just like extruded plastic all kind of woven together. And so when you are done going through this process, you can use this kind of thing and just kind of brush against it. And it's a really, really effective, almost idiot-proof way to remove a burr. So again, we're going to go through the whole sharpening process and you'll be able to see that. But that's the gist of it, right? We go coarse, medium, fine. Then we do the stropping, burr removal, nice, happy, stable, sharp edge. Any questions? What's up?
Are the other colored sponges
Not good. Yeah, so like the green ones, for example, they have a lot of abrasive in them, so that's going to fuck your edge up. What other colors are there? This is just blue and green, right?
The natural
That was
one.
like the
There's the walnut one.
Yeah, none of that shit. Get a blue one. Earlier we talked about cross-sectional geometry and how that plays a difference in terms of cutting, right? Thinner knives move through food more easily. As you sharpen over time, your knife will get thicker and thicker behind the edge. So let's go to page number 2, and you can see the image that looks like the Transformers. The black line here, this is like the outline of your knife when it's new. And the red lines here indicate sharpening over time, right? And you'll see that you move up the blade as you sharpen because you're removing metal. And if you look at the distance from one side to the other, you'll see the distance increases as you move up the blade, right? The thicker your knife gets behind the edge, the more tough and durable it's going to be, but the less easily it's going to move through food. It's going to displace a lot more material really rapidly. That requires a lot of force. So your knife is going to start wedging in foods. When you cut, it's not going to move through food as easily. It's not going to start cuts as easily. And also, the surface area of your bevel is going to increase. So the bevel is smaller here, and with each step up, it increases in size. The more surface area that you're dealing with, the longer sharpening is going to take you. So it's a natural thing to see the bevel get larger on your knife over time as you're sharpening at the exact same angle, right? It's not going to stay the same size. It's going to grow in size as you go. And your knife is going to slowly decrease in terms of its performance over time as it gets thicker and thicker behind the edge. We want to regain control over that. Cross-sectional geometry is no joke. It's the most important part of knife performance overall. There's nothing that matters more. You have the shittiest steel, the worst fit and finish. Everything else can be fucked up, but if your knife is super thin, it's going to cut really well, right? Might not stay sharp for a long time, it's going to cut really well. So in order to regain control over that, we do this thing called thinning behind the edge. If our sharpening is normally somewhere between, say, 10 and 15 degrees per side, thinning is going to be a much lower angle, maybe 2 to 4 degrees per side, right? And so that's indicated by this, I don't know if it's green or blue, but this other color that is on here, you can see that it's a much more acute angle overall. And as we do that, then we're able to make it thinner. We're able to regain control over how thick or thin our knife is behind the edge. Make sense? Cool. Let's go to the next page. So, I gotta update these images. In an ideal world, these are just not to scale. Like, it's really, I know I can do better. Steve, I need your help with images, man. We gotta make this work. Fuck. I gotta bring cooler shit. All right. So, in an ideal world, you'll do a little bit of thinning and then a little bit of sharpening every single time you sharpen, right? And that way, the knife consistently performs exactly the same way every time. Thinning is a really, really time-consuming process. Like, that shit takes a long time, and it's difficult to do well, and your knife gets scratched up on the side. So most people don't do that. Most people, like, they sharpen their knife regularly for a long period of time, and then they get pissed off at it one day because it's not doing what they want. They thin it down a lot, and then they go through that cycle over and over and over again. That's fine. The more frequently you do it, the less of a pain in the ass it's going to be. But no matter what, you're going to need to do it. Do any of you guys use knives that are extremely, extremely, extremely thin and hard? Anyone? This is also really applicable to single bevel knives, but there's a thing called a micro bevel. And a micro bevel is what I show here at the very last little bit of this edge. And you'll see that the distance from 3 to 4 is a less acute angle than the rest of the bevel there. And what a micro bevel is, it's removing the last little bit of the edge, that's the weakest part of the edge, and replacing it with something that's a little bit more durable. So you sacrifice a little bit in maximum potential sharpness in favor of something that's not going to chip as much and that's going to stay sharp a little bit longer. Micro bevels work really, really well to preserve cross-sectional geometry on things that are really thin or minimize chipping on things that are really hard. But it's not something that I would just do universally because if your knife isn't really thin or really hard, you're sacrificing something for very little gain in return. With single bevel knives, however, it is almost always a recommended application. The downside is that many people make the micro bevels macro bevels. They get too large, and that's too much of a sacrifice. So a micro bevel should never be larger than what you can remove in your subsequent sharpening. You should be able to like put a micro bevel on, and then when you sharpen the next time, you should be able to get rid of it and put a new one on. So you're never letting it grow. But you can touch up micro bevels. So if you want a quick way to touch up your edge without having to go through a complete sharpening, you can quickly straw up using the micro bevel and get back to a place that's functional for like a day. But you don't want to do that for like a week. Make sense? Cool. So that's everything that's going on in page number 3. Any questions? Okay, cool. Let's go to page number 4. So I'm going to focus on the bottom part first really quick. Have any of you guys ever heard about people talking about asymmetry in knives, and they express them in ratios like 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 90-10? Right. The ratios in knives are nice, easy ways to understand something that also don't really cover it extremely well. Much like when your family asks you how to do culinary things, and you want to give them simple answers because you know they're not going to care about all the stupid shit you actually think about when you cook. This is an explanation like that. So I always say steak, but it's a seafood restaurant. But my family used to always ask me about how to cook a steak. And there's a lot that goes into it, right? Like what's the cut? How thick is it? What am I trying to do with it? You might want to baste it a little bit. There's a lot of things you can do, but usually you just say like sear it hard 5 minutes per side and throw it into the oven until it's temped out, let it rest, slice it up, right? And it works, but it's a really shitty explanation. It doesn't give you like a sense of what's actually going on. So I would ignore the concept of ratios like 50-50, 70-30 entirely. Don't think about it at all. Instead, what you want to do is use your knife and see what happens, right? Sometimes the knives are ground asymmetrically as a function of just habits the knife makers have. Sometimes they do it intentionally because the knife will be slightly thinner right at the edge when they are slightly asymmetrical. Sometimes just people don't know any better. Most of the time, honestly, it's just like bad habits. However, you can really easily deal with asymmetry. If your knife does not move through food straight, that means it's exerting more pressure on one side than the other. And that can be part of the bevel. That can also be the side of the knife that's ground differently. If your knife steers, it's going to be exerting more pressure on one side than the other, right? And so when you see that, you want to create more surface area on the side that the knife steers towards in order to exert more pressure in that direction and get the knife to cut straight. And you can do that in one of 2 ways. You can adjust, well, one of 3 ways, I guess. You can adjust the amount of time that you spend sharpening on either side, right? So like, for example, if my knife steers this way, I can adjust the amount of time that I spend sharpening without changing the angle at all, get more surface area on there and get it cut straight. I can change the angle that I sharpen on either side, right? Or I can do a combination thereof. However, as you start to play around with the angles, you have to keep in mind that the more acute that you go overall, the sharper the knife will feel, but the more fragile or brittle it's going to be. The less acute that you go overall, the less sharp it's going to feel, but the more durable it's going to be. And so as long as you are armed with that knowledge, the ratio stuff doesn't matter. What matters is you use your knife, you're mindful, you're introspective, you figure out what's going on, and you find a constructive game plan that will get it to work the way that you need it to work. One important note is that if knives are if knives are clad, like if they have soft cladding on the outside and a hard core in the center, you need to make sure that the apex of the edge is somewhat centered. You don't want to shift it so far off to the side because eventually the cladding can become the edge and you waste all your money on a fancy steel that you're not using. That is how we deal with asymmetry overall. In terms of sharpening angles, single bevel knives are kind of built in. Like it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do already, so you don't even need to think that much about what the angle is. You just kind of have to follow what's already on the blade that's telling you to do. With double bevel knives, you can do that. You can follow what's already on there, and we'll get to that in a second as well. But you don't have to. There's a safe bet range for Japanese knives, and generally speaking, it's somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees per side. The closer you are to 10 or even below that, again, the sharper it's going to feel. The closer you are to 15 or even above that, the less sharp it's going to feel, but the more durable it's going to be. For Western knives, the range might be a little bit different. Maybe you're a little bit closer to like the 18 degrees, plus or minus a little bit. And again, you can be lower, you can be higher. So it's not a hard and fast, like you have to be this exact angle. Rather, use your knife, see what's going on. How does it feel? Does it hold up the way you want? Does it chip a lot? And then come up with a game plan to get it to do what you want. In terms of figuring out the angles, this really cool thing we have built into our smartphones now will help you do that. On the iPhone, there's an app called Measure. And if you click the Measure app, they have like an actual measuring thing, but they also have this level. And this level will show you angles. And so you can take it and you can put it down on your stone. You can tap the screen to zero it out, and you can see what does 10 degrees look like. What does 15 degrees look like? And so you don't have to guess or ballpark anything. You can literally see what it is right there. Also, really, really helpful for hanging photos. Just did that at home yesterday. Super badass. All right, so those are the angles that you want to pay attention to. Any questions about asymmetry so far? No? Okay, so in the upper image here, there are a few things that I'm trying to show. One, I want to show that what's important is that we have an even and consistent bevel from heel to tip. So the bevel is the part of the knife that we're doing the sharpening on. So if you look at this red line over here and you look at its distance from the edge, you'll see it's the same all the way through. So the distance from A to B is the same as the distance from G to H and so on for D to E. All right. The red line to the blue line, that is the minimum amount of thinning that I'd want to do on a blade. All right. When you are thinning a knife, you want to come in contact with at least 1/5 of the height of the knife. If you are making contact with less than that, you're not really having an overall impact on cross-sectional geometry in a meaningful way. Oftentimes when we do thinning for our customers, we're like 1/3 or halfway up the blade or even more. The lower the angle, the more difficult it is to maintain that consistently, but just know that that's the minimum amount that you would want to do. If you look at the tip over here, you'll see that part of the spine is colored in. So if we look at the distance here from D to E, you'll see that part of the spine is colored in. What's really cool is that this tells us how we need to sharpen the tips of our knives. If we want to have a consistent and even bevel, at some point that distance from D to E has to come into contact with the stone. Well, how do we do that? There's only one way to do that, and that is that we have to involve some lifting up and some rotating towards the spine in the course of our sharpening. And so our tip adjustment for sharpening our knives will always involve some lifting up and some rotating towards the spine, and that is true on either side of the knife. And we will do that until the bevel width comes into contact along the spine. That is the amount of that we need to do. And so that's what's shown here. And you'll see that that's also true for thinning. We still need the spine to come into contact with the stone by lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. So that is the way that we deal with tip adjustments when we're doing both thinning and regular sharpening. Make sense? Cool. On knives with distal taper, distal taper is where the knife tapers along the spine from the heel moving towards the tip. On knives with distal taper, they have a kind of cool feature built into them. Let me grab a piece of paper that I can draw this on really quick, and I will show you. Second. So if we imagine here for a second that I have like a thicker section of the knife overlaid on a thinner section of the knife, right? And I sharpen them at the same angle. The thinner section of the knife will have a smaller bevel appearance than the thicker section of the knife, which has a larger bevel appearance, right? However, as I just mentioned a second ago, what we are looking to do is to make sure that the bevel is even and consistent from heel to tip, same size all the way through. And so on knives with distal taper, that means that we have a slight dynamic angle adjustment as we go through from the heel to the tip. So that means the tip will generally be a little bit more acute and the heel will be a little bit less acute. And that's super cool because that means that the heel of the knife being slightly less acute is going to be a little bit more durable. So if you need to do something rough, like, I don't know, take the head off a fish or, I don't know, whatever the rough stuff that you might do, the heel of the knives with distal taper will work much better for that. And if you're doing really finesse-oriented type stuff, the tip of the knife will work better for that. And so that's kind of a cool built-in feature to knives with distal taper. Make sense so far? Cool. All right, let's move on to some single bevel stuff. So we'll go to the next page here. We kind of already briefly went over this. These are the three main kinds of single bevel knives that you'll see. Yanagiba, that's the one for slicing raw boneless proteins. Deba, that's the one for breaking down fish. And Usuba, that's the one for vegetable work. There are actually a number of other shapes that exist out there. There are two more common ones that you will see. If you take the Yanagiba and the Deba and you put those together, you get a type of knife called a Miyoroshi Deba. And a Miyoroshi Deba is taller than a Yanagiba but less tall than a Deba, and thicker than a Yanagiba but less thick than a Deba, and it will allow you to do both of those jobs functionally, though it's not quite as good as the individual knives would be at those tasks. If you wanted one knife to be able to do a lot of that kind of stuff with, a Miyoroshi Deba can work well for that. If you have fish with like really hard bones, like grouper or big snapper, don't use a Miyoroshi Deba. It's going to fuck up your knife. But if you're breaking down salmon or bronzino or something where the bones, mackerel, the bones are a little bit less hard, that's a knife that you can use to break the fish down and then skin it and portion it and do a lot of stuff with it. So if you're looking at that kind of like convenience knife, that's what a Miyoroshi Deba is. Conversely, if we take a Yanagiba and an Usuba and we put those things together, we get a knife called a kiritsuke. And kiritsuke gained a lot of popularity because it looks fucking cool. And also because there's all this kind of like Asian mystique shit attached to it where people are like, oh, it's only for the top chef of the kitchen. It's a really difficult knife to use. And people start buying it because they're like, oh, it's like a general purpose knife. And they start using it like a chef's knife. It's not a chef's knife. It's a single bevel knife. It combines the job of yanagiba and the job of an usuba. Nowadays, people produce a chef's knife shaped like that. So it's just a double bevel knife, but it has the shape of a kiritsuke, which is that kind of like drop tip shape. It looks badass. Everyone loves it. But people just call it a kiritsuke, even though it is technically a kiritsuke shaped wagyuto or a kiritsuke shaped gyuto. It's really important to differentiate between those things because if you're buying a kiritsuke, that has a very specific intended function. But if you're buying a kiritsuke shaped wagyuto, it's a chef's knife. Do whatever the fuck you want to do with the chef's knife. It's great. Like that's what they are for. So those are the main kinds of single bevel knives that you will see. Any questions about that stuff so far? Cool. Yeah, because you guys don't have like really, really hard bone fish in here. Like no one's breaking down like big ass grouper or like. Yeah. So for what I've seen so far, like if you're getting in kampachi, you're not breaking down the whole thing, or you break it into like belly and loin while it's still on the body, not cutting through stuff as much. The Miyoshi deba will be cool because you can do the filleting of the fish, but you then also, if you get one that's long enough, like 240 millimeters, you can also then skin it and portion it and do all that kind of stuff with it so that you're not running back and like switching out knives all the time. And for mackerel, super easy. For salmon, honestly, it's great. Like it's a really great knife for salmon. All right, so let's go to page number 6. Single bevel knives have a different kind of cross-sectional geometry than double bevel knives do. And we were talking about this earlier. Where I'm like, you look at one side, it looks different from the other side. This is the way that it looks different specifically. There is the face of the knife over here, which is shown here as flat, but it's actually usually slightly hollow ground as a function of the way the knives are made. And then there's this ridge over here, and that is called the shinogi line. So that's this ridge right here. That's called the shinogi line. And then from the shinogi line down to the edge, that is our bevel. There are two main ways that we can sharpen knives like this, and I'm going to cover both of them. But in here, I show what I would call a hamaguri sharpening, which I think is the absolute best way to sharpen these kinds of knives. And what you'll see is that there's an upper section to the bevel and a lower section to the bevel, and they're sharpened at ever so slightly different angles. Not like lifting up the knife different, but like more finger placement pressure different, so that they're very, very close. They almost blend together. You'll see that there's a little micro bevel here at the edge. Single bevel knives, because they have an angle only on one side, are much more acute overall than their double bevel equivalents, even though the knives are thicker at the spine. So for example, a usuba might be like 8 to 10 degrees on one side. That's 8 to 10 degrees, period, because there's nothing on the other side. If a double bevel knife is sharpened 10 degrees on one side and 10 degrees on this side, that's a 20 degree inclusive angle. That is significantly less acute than something like that. Yanagiba, often like 10 to 12 degrees. So really, really acute angles. Deba, 15 to 18 degrees. Really, really acute. So by applying a micro bevel, we get a much more durable edge, especially when you have, like plastic cutting boards or something that's like less than perfect for that kind of knife, something that won't chip as much. So I show it on here because I want people to think about that. You can see also here, there's like a misty steel and then like a shinier steel at the edge. That's because this knife is made out of two different kinds of steel, and they are clad knives. There are some knives that are made out of solid pieces of steel, and they are called honyaki knives, but most knives will be clad like this, and the intersection that they come together, that's called the lamination line. If it's a solid steel knife, it will have a kind of misty, wavy line on there, kind of closer to the top, and that is called a hamon, and it's usually got like a wave pattern with it. On the back side, you will see that the knives are hollow ground, right? So if you look at the back here, it actually dishes in this way, and then there's a flat rim all the way around the edge, and you can see that I'm dropping stuff. You can see that that is shown here and here. Those are flat, and this is hollow ground here. The flat part is called uraoshi. It's also the name of the sharpening that we're going to do to that. And the hollow ground part there is called the urasuki. Okay? So that is the cross-sectional geometry of what a single bevel knife looks like. It's really important to know this. We have very limited real estate on this back side that's hollow ground. The hollow ground side really has an impact on the way the knife interacts with food. It stops food from sticking to the side so much. It minimizes the amount of pressure exerted against the food on this side. The bevel side does most of the pressure exerting. So, for example, when you are breaking down fish, the bevel side is facing down towards the bone. The hollow ground side is facing up towards the fillet. Less pressure exerted against the piece that matters, right? when you are slicing with it, there are two main slicing techniques. One is called sohizukuri, it's slicing like this. Again, the bevel side is facing at the piece that you're cutting away from, and the hollow ground side is facing the piece you're cutting off of that, and less damage is caused to it. When you're doing hirazukuri, cutting like this, you are using that generally on more durable fish like tuna or large snapper, and you are using the bevel then to apply pressure to get the food to move the way that you want it to move while you're cutting. Do not over sharpen the back side of the knife. It's one of the worst mistakes you can make on single bevel knives. Does this cross-sectional geometry make sense to everyone? Cool. All right. Let's go to the next page. So, as I mentioned before, there are two main kinds of sharpening that you'll see with single bevel knives. One of them is called betatogi, and the other is called hamaguri. I'm going to teach you guys hamaguri because it's the best way to do this stuff. I'm going to tell you guys what betatogi is. Betatogi. Beta is onomatopoeia in Japanese for the sound of something laying flat on something else. So like beta. And the idea behind betatogi is that the entire bevel lays flat on the stone. And you make contact all the way from the shinogi line all the way to the edge in one go. You will see chefs, especially in the US, commonly do this kind of sharpening because it's a little bit faster. And there's less that you have to think about with it, right? The upside of betatogi is that the overall cross-section of the knife is slightly thinner overall, and so the knife will feel sharper, but it will be much more brittle, and food will stick more to the bevel than it otherwise would. Hamaguri sharpening is that kind of like two-piece sharpening that we're talking about, where you do the upper section and lower section separately, and it creates a slight convex bevel. And that bevel is slightly thicker, which helps it be a little bit more durable, but not thick enough that it's like not moving through food the way that you want. And it helps with food release. Food gets pushed up and away from the bevel without having something to stick to quite as much. So again, we're going to go over hamaguri sharpening. And much like I was talking about before, we are going to go through our 3-stone setup. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to do the upper section of the bevel. So from the shinogi line down to roughly the lamination line, coarse stone. And then from the lamination line down to the edge, coarse stone. And we're going to do that by applying pressure differently. So when we are sharpening the first section of the knife, our fingers are going to be on the opposite side of that shinogi line, and my pressure is going to be down against the stone and up towards the shinogi line. Not so much that it's rocking over, but if I'm trying to like push it up a little bit. When I do the second part of the sharpening, my fingers are going to move down towards the edge. My fingers are going to be as close to the edge as possible without touching the stone, and I'm going to sharpen there. So we're going to do coarse, coarse, and on the back side, in order to preserve as much of that hollow ground space as possible, only use a finishing stone. Don't use a coarse stone. Don't use a medium grit stone. Just use a finishing stone. When we sharpen the backside goes totally flat on the stone, not ever lifting up. If you lift up, that is one of the other seriously fucked up things you can do to your knife. Please don't do that. I hate fixing it. It sucks. Flat on the stone. Our fingers are on the shinogi line, and this is the way that we're going to sharpen the backside. So, once again, we do coarse, coarse, fine. Medium, medium, fine. Fine, fine, fine. If it was betatogi, you would do coarse, fine. Medium, fine. Fine, fine. At the end, we can smooth everything out, make it look pretty. We can apply the micro bevel at that point, and we'll do one last move on the uraoshi sharpening. We can do the same kind of stropping stuff for burr removal. You just want to make sure the backside is always flat. So you'll be stropping on the front and then doing the uraoshi sharpening, and stropping on the front and doing the uraoshi sharpening. The sponge also works well for this, but because the edges are much more acute, you just want to be more delicate with that. They're very easy to chip. Again, I do recommend applying a micro bevel. Micro bevels will generally be somewhere in the 35 to 45 degree angle of things with really light pressure on the edge trailing part of your stroke. So we have edge trailing where the edge is at the back of that motion and edge leading where the edge is at the front of that motion. We use edge trailing strokes for stropping. We use edge trailing strokes for applying the micro bevel. Any questions about this kind of sharpening? Cool. All right, so on to page 8. Over time, your knife is going to shrink, and we want it to shrink in a very, very specific way. We want to make sure that whatever material we're removing from the edge gets removed here at the shinogi line as well. So that means that if I take like a millimeter off the edge from a chip, my shinogi line has to go up 1 millimeter. And the reason for that is that if the shinogi line does not move and the edge moves, our knife will become less acute over time. And if the shinogi line moves faster than the edge, our knife will become more acute over time. So it is important that we move them up at the same rate over time. And you'll see here on the bottom image that there's much more material being removed here from the front side and much less material being removed from the back side through the course of our sharpening. Again, that's because we are trying to preserve as much of this hollow ground side as possible. When the knife is flattened out at the end, it is not really feasible to repair it. Like, that's it. The knife does not work the same way it would otherwise work. It doesn't mean you have to throw it away. It just means it's not going to work in the same way that you would expect a single bevel knife to work, and you have to sharpen the backside a little bit differently. And so, for example, like if you have a deba that gets really well used like that, use that deba to take off the head. Use that deba to break down the bones. Use that deba to split the head in half, right? And then have the newer, nicer deba for the breaking down of the actual like fillets. Same deal here at the tip. We need to make that same lifting up and rotating back towards the spine adjustment as we sharpen the tip of our knife. That is a universal tip adjustment. Lift up, rotate back towards the spine. Cool. Any questions? All right. So let's get to our last image, and then I want to do as much sharpening with you guys as possible. One of the most useful things that I can teach you is how to use Sharpie when you sharpen. Sharpie is the fucking greatest tool. Like, we've gone over this, right? Yeah, I know we've gone over this also. And I know we've gone over this as well. So I talk about this a lot. Sharpie will provide for you instant high contrast visual feedback with what is going on, right? You can see what the mistakes that you are making are as you do them. Like, imagine if every time that you had some food and you salted it properly, like it changed color and you're like fucking done. Like, you know, it would be perfect. That's what this is going to do for you. So when we sharpen, we are going to color in the edge of our knife, but also some of the area behind our edge. So if you look at the top image here, you'll see that not just the bevel itself, but some of the area behind it is also colored in. I use these big ass Magnum Sharpies for it. You can do it with a regular Sharpie. It doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that it's totally colored in. When you color it in, shake it around for a second, let the Sharpie dry. Sharpie and water don't mix well. You want to make sure it's completely dry before you start sharpening. There are 7 mistakes that you can make in the context of knife sharpening. And 6 of them will show up really, really easily with this kind of Sharpie technique. And one of them is the one you'll feel. The one you're going to feel is inconsistent or uneven burr formation. You form a big burr in one area, a small burr in another area. We talked about feeling for a burr earlier. Pay attention to that shit. The other 6 are angle too high, angle too low, under rotation at the tip, over rotation at the tip, not lifting up enough, and lifting up too much. And they all show up in really, really, really distinct patterns. And once you see them, you're like, oh, my angle is too low. I'm going to raise that shit up. Oh, my angle is too high. I'm going to lower that shit. I didn't rotate enough. I'm going to rotate more. This is how simple this is going to make sharpening for you. So the first one here, this is angle too high. So that means that as we are sharpening, the spine of our knife is too high up relative to the stone. And what you will see here is that Sharpie gets removed right along the very edge of the knife, but not for your entire bevel. If you do this in the long run, your knife will become less sharp because the angle is going to be less acute overall. So it's going to start wedging in foods a lot more. It's not going to cut well. When you see this mistake, what do? You lower the spine. You lower the angle. You make it slightly more acute, right? Like, this is how simple this shit is going to be. The next one here is angle too low. That means the spine of the knife is too close to the stone. This is what you want to do when you are thinning your knife. This is not what you want to do when you are sharpening your knife. You will see that the edge of the knife stays black and the area behind it becomes shiny. Your knife is not going to get sharp when you do this because you're not touching the edge. It will get thinner, however. All right? If you're thinning, you can keep doing this until all the Sharpie is removed all the way through to the edge. And you can look at it and see that cross-sectionally it's a lot thinner than it was before. And you can also feel for that by pinching the blade and running your fingers off the edge. You can always feel for how thick your knife is that way. So when you see this angle too low thing, raise it up a little bit, right? The next one over here is under rotation of the tip. So we've talked about the tip adjustment being lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. If you lift up but you don't rotate, that's this under rotation. The long-term effect of this is you get a bird's beak tip at the very tip of your knife. It's not great, so we don't want that. So when you see this, you want to rotate just a little bit more. We're not talking about like big adjustments, tiny adjustments. The next one down is over rotation. That means that as I come up towards the tip, I'm lifting up and then I'm rotating way too far towards the spine. And you'll see the bevel grows larger as I go towards the tip. The long-term effect of that is that you end up with a really big amount of belly at the very tip of your knife, so you have to lift up a lot more to utilize the tip. It's not great, so when you see that, you want to make sure that you're rotating a little bit less. Going down from that, we have not lifting up enough. Not lifting up enough means that I'm rotating, but I'm not raising up as I go. And as I do that, the tip of the knife will stay dark, and the area behind it just looks like I'm lowering the angle, because I am. And so this will also yield a bird's beak or like a little frown in your edge, just a little bit further back from the tip. So instead, we are going to lift up a little bit more when we see that. And the last one here is lifting up too much. And that means I'm coming up too high as I go. It's very difficult to see, but what's going to happen is the tip of your knife gets ground away. If you imagine that the bevel of your knife is a plane like this, and you got a seafood delivery. If you imagine that the bevel of your knife is a plane like this, lifting up too much is going to make the plane bend like this at the very tip of the knife. And if you look at it, you can sometimes see light bending over the edge like that. And in really extreme cases, you might even see the tip kind of bend to the side a little bit as a function of lifting up too much. But lifting up too much is just going to mean you have no tip on your knife. In order to fix this one, not only do you have to not lift up as much, but you have to recreate the tip of your knife. Any of you guys broken the tips off your knives before? Right? The way that we fix this is the same way that we deal with a broken tip. When you have a broken tip, you do not want to fix it from the edge. You're not going to grind the edge up the way you want. In fact, what you're going to do is you're going to grind from the spine. And you're going to grind from the spine until you have a point again. Start far enough back so you don't have like a weird stub nose type thing. But grinding from the spine means that you're not creating a thicker cross-sectional geometry at the edge. You don't induce any more belly on the edge of your knife. You just get like a nice tip again. You can do that on your core stone. You can do that on a sidewalk outside. You can bug me any day of the week for that. It's the easiest thing to do. I fix them all the time. That is the way you deal with lifting up too much, and it's also the way you deal with broken tips. When you've done a good job sharpening, you will see that the Sharpie gets removed all the way consistently and evenly from the heel to the tip, and you'll feel for a burr, and the burr will be even and consistent from the heel to the tip, and life will be good. All right? You want to do this consistently. You're going to color in the knife. You're going to let it dry. You're going to sharpen a little bit. Look at your shit. See what's going on. Make your adjustments. Dry it off. Color it in. Do it again. Dry it off. Color it in. Do it again and again and again and again. Ad nauseum until you're so fucking sick of Sharpie you can't take it anymore, and then do it again. And when you are done, grab some acetone and some cotton pads and take that stuff off, clean it off. That's it. Nice and easy. I genuinely think it's like the most useful tool that I can teach people when they are sharpening. Cool. That is everything that I have in this little packet here. Are there any questions that you guys have so far as we have gone through this? Doing all right? Okay, cool. Let me skip ahead in my papers really quick, make sure that I covered everything that I want to go through so that we can get to actually sharpening. We went over angles. Do you guys know what the apex of the edge is? Like, is that a term that you guys are familiar with? The apex is the point where they come together to actually meet at the very edge. So it's important that we're making sure, like, for example, on clad knives, that the apex is somewhat centered. Distal taper demonstrates. All right, cool. Sweet, let's sharpen. So here in front of me, I brought a bunch of different stones. I'm going to start on a medium grit stone. You may choose to start on a medium grit stone most of the time. You may choose to start on a finishing stone. You may choose to start on a core stone. It depends on how frequently you're sharpening and how much metal you need to remove. But for the sake of getting through stuff, I'm foregoing a core stone and we're starting on a medium grit stone. If I needed to soak my stone, I would have done that prior to starting. This is a splash and go stone, so I'm splashing water on the surface. You'll note that my stone is held at a slight downward angle. I find that that's really convenient, both as a function of water control, like I splash water here, it goes that way, and also as a function of ergonomics. The further away I move from myself, when my knife is planar to me, my wrist has a tendency to tilt back up. Moving slightly downward mitigates that a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to maintain consistent angles as I sharpen. So, body positioning, like we talked about before, kind of off to the side a little bit, starting from our pinch grip, index finger to the spine, thumb down towards the heel. My angle of approach means like this angle here relative to the surface of the stone. My angle of approach is going to be somewhere around 45 to 60 degrees. It's not specifically important what it is. What's important is that my wrist is like nice and comfortable. I'm not like this or like this. And that I increase the amount of surface area contact I have. So relative to being perpendicular, this kind of angle offset gives me much more surface area contact with the stone. And it gives my knife a different vector of wobble than the direction of motion that I'm moving. So my motion of sharpening is always going to be straight forward, straight back. If I'm holding my knife like this, it wobbles the same way I'm sharpening. It's a little bit more difficult to maintain a consistent angle. It's not impossible, it's just a little bit more difficult. By moving it to this offset angle of approach, I have a different offset in the way the knife wobbles relative to the way that I'm moving. So I'm going to take 2 to 3 fingers and I'm going to move them down to the edge as close as possible to the stone without actually touching the stone. If you can feel the stone under your fingertips, your fingers are going to start bleeding. Like just mostly because you're going to grind away your fingertips. So don't do that. If you can feel the stone or you see that your fingers are bleeding all the time, move them up just a little bit, but you want them as close to the edge as possible. We're going to use the heel of the knife and the edge of the stone as reference points. So if I start 1 centimeter in, I'm going to go forward, I'm going to come back, I'm still 1 centimeter in. So that way I can make sure that my motion is always straight forward and straight back as I move through. As I go down the blade, I can either stop, move my fingers and go again, stop, move my fingers and go, or I can kind of dynamically crawl my fingers up as I go. It's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Doesn't really matter as long as you're paying attention to that. Because we are feeling for a burr being even and consistent, you don't have to count the number of strokes you're doing, right? It doesn't matter if you do 10 here, 10 there, 5 here, 5 there. None of that matters. What matters is at the end of the day, we feel for a burr and it's even and consistent all the way through from the heel to the tip. So our angle of approach is somewhere in that 45-degree range of things. Our fingers are as close to the edge as possible. We pick our sharpening angle somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees per side, using the Sharpie to figure out whatever you want to do with that stuff. And our motion is straight forward, straight back. I want to apply more pressure on the edge trailing stroke and relax on the edge leading stroke. The amount of pressure I'm applying is not heavy. If you grab a kitchen scale, you will see that the max sharpening pressure that you're going to do is going to be somewhere around like 1,500 to 2,000 grams. So you can press with your left hand, or in her case, the right hand. You're going to feel. What does 1,500, 2,000 grams feel like? Medium pressure, somewhere around like 500 to 1,000 grams. Feel, not heavy. It's not a lot of pressure. Finishing, you're going to be somewhere around like 100 plus or minus a little bit. Really, really light pressure. So it's not going to be about strength. It's going to be about finesse and consistency. So here we go. We start our sharpening, and I'm moving my fingers up as I go. Yeah, you guys are more than welcome to come all the way over here. As I come towards the tip, I have to start making my tip adjustment, which is lifting up and rotating back towards the spine, right? So there are a couple of different ways that one can do this. I like to tuck my arm inside a little bit as I come up towards the tip. And here, I use a slight wrist rotation to deal with my lifting up and rotating back. I can always stop here and check. Did I lift up enough? Did I rotate enough? How much of the bevel is in contact with the stone? I can look at it. And as I come back down, I'm going to make contact again with the rest of the edge. And you can hear this swishing motion as I do stuff. And it sounds different from just doing the tip by itself, right? There's a swishing motion that goes along with that. So I like this because there's less going on in terms of the amount of movement that I have to do. All I have to do is this slight wrist adjustment here, literally just like a tiny rotation here. However, some people, they like to do this thing. You can do this also. It's a very similar movement. You're just breaking your wrist and rotating your hand over. But same thing, I can stop here, check, did I lift up enough and rotate enough, and come forward all the way back, connecting everything together. I don't want to sharpen the tip totally separate from the rest of the blade, otherwise I'm going to end up with like one shape here and one shape there, and they'll be disconnected, and there's like usually an angle that kind of develops in that area. So I want to make sure that I'm connecting everything together as I go. So let's sharpen, and let's feel for a burr. We have a burr. And it's actually pretty good already. That's sweet. All right. So I'm going to pass this around, and I want you guys to feel what this feels like. While we're doing that, I'm going to sharpen one of the single bevel knives so you can see what that process looks like. So again, hold the knife here, place your thumb on the side that I just sharpened, and run your fingers up this way all the way along the edge from the heel to the tip, and then flip the knife over and do the same thing on the other side. So you'll feel both what a burr feels like and what the absence of a burr feels like. Cool? So for single bevel sharpening, similar kind of thing. Pinch grip, index finger to the spine. This time, however, I want to sharpen the upper section of the blade. So I have my fingers, which are tightly grouped. Note that my fingers are not spread out. They're tightly grouped together, as close to the shinogi line as possible, applying my pressure on the edge trailing stroke and relaxing on the edge leading stroke, working through towards the tip. And my tip adjustment is the same, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. The cool thing about this is that I can feel where my angle needs to be because I can ride along the shinogi line as I go up. So I can feel if I've gone over it, I'm not doing it right. But I can use that as a guide to make sure that I'm touching where I want to touch. So in the first part of the sharpening, we can't rely on the burr to tell us if we're doing a good job or not. We have to rely on visual inspection. So we'll look at it and we'll see like, okay, I have an even and consistent scratch pattern here, or I can color it in with Sharpie if I want. The shinogi line is moving up at the rate that I want it to move up at. Yay, everything is looking good. And then I will take my fingers and I'll move them down closer to the edge. So you'll note that I'm not lifting up the spine to change the angle here. I think when people do like really drastic angle changes, it really fucks up the way the knife performs. You end up with a very pronounced convex edge, and it doesn't feel as sharp as you want when you're cutting through stuff. So really, really, really light on the angle change. It's mostly just where you're applying pressure. So now I sharpen here at the edge. And as I do this, same thing at the tip, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. Here, I can rely on the burr formation to make sure that I'm actually sharpening the edge. So feel for it, have a burr that's even and consistent from heel to tip, and that is that. All right, everyone was able to feel for the burr on this last thing over here, right? Cool. And it's like really apparent, right? There's no mistaking. You're like, that's a fucking burr. Now I know what that shit is. And you feel the other side and you're like, that's not a burr. I'm sure. That's the level to which you should be confident in that. Now, as you get better at sharpening, make it smaller. The smaller the burr is, the less metal you're wasting. The longer your knife is going to last, right? But in the beginning, I think it's much more helpful just to be sure. Like 100%, that's what a burr is. I got it. All right. So we've done our first side. We're going to start again from the pinch grip. We're going to move our index finger to the spine, thumb to the spine, index finger down towards the heel, and we're going to start sharpening again. Here, I can't use that same angled approach in the beginning because the handle gets in the way. So that's why some people choose to switch hands if they do. I don't, so instead I start off perpendicular. Otherwise, the concept's the same. I'm going to take my fingers, I'm going to get them as close to the edge as possible without touching the stone, and I'm going to apply my pressure on the edge trailing stroke and relax on the edge leading stroke. And then I'm going to work my way up towards the tip. You'll see that as I come up towards the tip, I can transition back into that angle approach that I wanted before. And it's just as soon as my hand has, the handle has clearance, right? As I come up towards the tip on this side, I have to start making my adjustment, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. And there are a couple of different ways that I like to do it, so I'm going to show you the two that I use the most. One, I will step to the side over here, rotate my body, and I will use this kind of rocking motion. It's almost like a back golf swing in an odd way. But again, I can stop here and check. Did I lift up enough and rotate enough? And I'm looking for that swishing sound coming back down together. Right? The other one is to do small incremental adjustments. Do you guys remember in like elementary school with graph paper, you draw like a bunch of lines and you make like this cool looking curve and it looks like something out of Tron? You can do that to your edge. You don't remember that shit? Those curves out of like straight lines with tangents? I don't know, it's stuck in my head. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's just a bunch of straight lines.
Yeah.
All right, and
And then it looks like a
exactly. And the more like compacted, tightly grouped those lines are, the smoother the curve is, right? So we can do that kind of to our edge as well. So as we come up towards the tip and we start to make our adjustment, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine, say we'll pick like this point here. We're going to sharpen by moving forward and backward one time. And then we're going to make the tiniest of adjustments, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine. So now I'm sharpening here, forward, backward, tiny adjustment, so on and so forth. So as I'm going, each forward and backward is accompanied by a tiny, each movement forward and backward is accompanied by a tiny adjustment, lifting up and rotating back towards the spine until I get all the way up to the tip where I want to be, right? And then the same thing, we're going to feel for a burr. We're going to make sure it's even and consistent from heel to tip. Sweet, it is. And we are going to flip this over to the other side. Now I've completed everything that I want to do on my first stone. This is a double-sided stone, really convenient. So I flipped it over, and now all of a sudden I have a 6,000 grit stone. So I went from my medium stone to my finishing stone. A lot of people really get intimidated by the numbers. Like, can you jump from 1,000 to 6,000? Yeah, absolutely. You can jump from fucking 800 to 8,000. You're just going to spend more time on the next stone, the larger that gap is. So if you have smaller gaps, you can jump a little bit more quickly through them. And that's why sometimes people will choose to like bridge gaps. So for example, like 1,000, 4,000, 8,000. You don't have to. Really, like just get a good medium stone, get a good finishing stone, call it a fucking day. 1,000 to 6,000 is pretty normal. 1,000 to 8,000 is pretty normal. 400 to 8,000, you'll hate yourself. It's going to suck. All right, so now as we go through the sharpening process again on our next stone, we have an additional metric that we want to pay attention to. So far we paid attention to like all the issues with the Sharpie and making sure we form a burr that's even and consistent from heel to tip. Now we're going to also visually inspect the edge. And we're going to see what does it look like. For example, like if you look now, you can see kind of that like white mistiness. You can see some of the scratches on there. Right, like the scratches are somewhat visible as you look at it. And it's got kind of like a misty look to it. Right? So as we go through our progression, much like using sandpaper, we're going to get rid of the coarser scratches and replace them with finer scratches. So in this case, the scratch pattern is going to look much finer, and it's probably going to look a little bit shinier. And so we are looking to get rid of the old scratches and replace them with new scratches that are finer. That's what we're doing in our progression from coarse to medium to fine. Make sense? Cool. So otherwise, same deal. I'm going to just sharpen the heel really quick so you can see the difference on one side of the knife. what the finishing side looks like relative to the medium side. Cool, cool. So if we look now, you can see like shiny, shiny, less shiny, right? Cool. You can see the difference there, and you can see the difference there, right? All right, sweet. You know what that looks like? Beautiful. So you can see much shinier part there, much finer scratch pattern, less shiny here, less fine scratch pattern. I know we've gone over this like countless times, so cool, beautiful. So as you go through your progression, ideally, in a perfect world, your burr will be smaller each jump that you make, right? So you'll have the biggest burr on your coarse stone and a slightly smaller burr on your medium grit stone, and on your finishing stone, ideally the smallest of the burrs. You still want to make sure you can feel stuff, still make sure it's there, but otherwise it's the same process. So we're feeling again, it's there, flip the knife over. And because we're feeling for a burr, I don't have to pay attention to the amount of time I spend in any part or the number of strokes or anything like that. So now I've gone through both sides. You may spend more time than I'm spending here. Like it looks easy, but it's also because I'm hitting the exact same angle every time, and I've been doing this for like a very, very long time. If you're spending like 30, 40 minutes on one knife, you're fucking something else up. Like something is going wrong. So ideally, you should be spending somewhere between like 5 and 15 minutes on a knife, unless you're doing like a much more major repair. If it's going longer than that, I would start looking at what's going wrong in the course of your sharpening. Is your angle off, or like something must be wrong there. So don't spend that much time. Don't blast through your knife metal-wise either. Like there's some guys that they sharpen every day on like a coarse stone, and every 6 months they're buying a new knife. Don't be like that. All right. So now we want to go through the steps that will help us weaken the burr's connection to the edge and make it as small as possible. And this is called stropping. And the stropping motion here is the same motion that you can use for touching up your knife in between sharpening. So for example, if you're going through service and you're like, fuck, I need a honing steel that's not working the way I want, instead of a honing steel, in lieu of a honing steel, grab your finishing stone and do this, all right? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to cover the entire length of the knife from the tip to the heel or heel to tip, alternating sides each time with edge trailing pressure. So there are a few different ways I like to do this. One way is I'll start in the lower corner of the stone here, having already lifted up and rotated back, and I'll use this little space here to kind of drop down before I come all the way across. It's kind of like a J-shaped stroke, so we'll call it a J stroke. So one time like that. Alternatively, you can start here, again, having lifted up and rotated back towards the spine, and drop all the way through here. I'm not going off the edge of the stone. I'm not lifting up as I move away from myself. It's a very controlled angle at the same angle I was sharpening at. So you can use Sharpie here as well. Color in both sides, do both sides, take a look, fix what you need to fix, and keep going back with it. On the back side, I can start here with the heel in the corner and come back this way, again, rotating and lifting as I go. I can do the reverse of that J stroke. I can do the reverse of just coming across like this. Find something that feels comfortable. Try them all. Figure out what feels comfortable for you and do that. And so as you do it, it's going to look something like this. And you're going to do it a number of times. How many times? It's tough to say. So I would encourage you to just pick a number between 5 and 10 and do that number of sets. And then at the end, feel. Do you still feel a burr? If you can still feel a burr, do a little bit more. Lighten up your pressure a little bit. You want to do this until you no longer feel a burr. It doesn't mean the burr is gone. It just means it's really, really small or potentially straightened out. So this is where we're using extremely light pressure, like 100, 200 grams, really not a lot at all. And we're making sure that we're maintaining the same angle that we were sharpening at previously. So now I can no longer feel a burr on either side. This is good. This means that I'm at a place where I can actually remove it. So if, for example, if we just stopped here and we started cutting stuff, it's going to cut really well for like 3 cuts. And then the edge is going to kind of plastically deform. It's going to like bend over, and your knife is going to dull really, really rapidly. So if you see when you're done sharpening that your knife gets dull almost immediately after it hits a cutting board, chances are you are not doing a good enough job at burr removal. So you want to go back and do more of this kind of stuff, right? Your edge should last longer than that. So now that we've done this part of weakening the burr's connection to the edge, making it as small as possible, we're going to use the sponge for the actual removal. And so with really light pressure at a higher angle than we were doing stuff at. And this is why it's important to not have abrasive up in this shit, because this would absolutely destroy the edge otherwise, right? In Japan, you'll see people do a lot of different things. They'll take denim and just strop on denim. They'll grab a kitchen towel and like do that shit. Some people cut through wine cork. Other people use hard felt for doing this kind of stuff. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. Try them. See what's up. consistently, this has been the most idiot-proof way that I've taught burr removal. Like, this shit works. And when I have to teach people, like, on the other side of the world, like I have a customer in Germany or New Zealand or something, and I'm on Zoom, I do this because I'm confident that they will do a good job doing this. Like, it's that effective. And blue sponges are everywhere. When you're done, just in case we did cause any damage, go back through and do maybe like 1 or 2 stropping passes, and that's it. And ideally, when you are done, you should have an edge that cuts stuff well. So cut food. Like, that's what you're doing with your knife anyways. Just go cut food and see how it works. But if you want to test it out, there are a number of different ways you can test it. A lot of the Japanese guys, they have hair, which I do not. They'll take the knife on the back of their hair and they'll just see, like, does it catch? Does it feel like it digs into it a little bit? You can do a similar thing on your thumbnail. So you can take the edge of the knife and you can put it on your thumbnail and just pull. And when it's sharp and it has an appropriate amount of bite, it digs in, it just sticks. It doesn't want to slide around. No, you're not going to cut through your thumbnail. It's not like you're applying downward pressure. It just doesn't move. And so that's a nice, easy way to check and make sure. So that's one test you can do. Another thumb test that's kind of useful is to take the edge of the knife. I'm going to do it on this one because it will be easiest to see. Take the edge of your knife and you can flex it down against your thumbnail, and you can see here, you see how the edge deforms under my thumb pressure?
Yes.
Right? So this is a function of edge thinness, right? So when you are thinning your knife, or when you're trying to get a sense of like how brittle a knife is going to be or how well it's going to move through food, you can do something like that. If it flexes a lot, it's going to be a really thin knife. It's going to be really brittle, but it's going to move through food really easily. If there's no flex at all, you can expect it to be much more durable. And so that can be a gauge of like, hey, do I need to thin my knife down? Again, you can also just look at your knife and see, is it thick? You can pinch your knife and see like how does it feel when I run off the edge? Is there like a big drop off? But those are nice, easy things to do. You can also cut paper because everyone likes cutting paper. And ideally, it should feel consistent as you move all the way through that kind of stuff, so that there's no part that feels like it moves more or less. There's nothing that catches on it. What's nice about cutting paper is that if you have like little nicks or chips, you'll be able to feel that immediately. So you know, okay, I have to go back and do a little bit more. Cool? All right, so that's all the double bevel stuff. Let me spend a little bit more time on single bevel stuff.
I have a non-sharpening, but still knife-related question.
Yes, what's up?
As a professional who's probably seen all of the things,
Yes.
do you have like a
Cool, I'm good on time.
way to stop bleeding very quickly?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so a couple of ways. And one of them I had like wrong for a long time. There was this whole mythology about super glue being developed for World War II. Totally false, apparently. But super glue is a really, really, really effective way to seal up cuts really quickly. However, I would encourage you to not use like regular store-bought super glue because it metabolizes down into a bunch of things, but one of them is cyanide, so no bueno. But there is a medical type of super glue called Dermabond, which is similar but chemically just different enough that it doesn't metabolize down into cyanide. And often you can buy the veterinary ones on Amazon, and they have blue dye in them, so you can see exactly where you're putting that stuff. It is extremely effective for small cuts. Just like pinch them together, put that stuff on there. Works really well. And then I also keep a packet of wound seal in my bag literally all the time. Wound seal it hurts like a motherfucker when you put it on, but it doesn't rely on your blood at all to do any clotting. Like, it clots itself, and it will be like it feels like a kind of bumpy scar thing on there, but it will heal underneath that. And so those are probably the two easiest ways to deal with like a lot of bleeding. Just keep in mind, if the cut is really big, don't put wound seal on there and then go to the doctor, because they'll have to carve the thing out before they do stitches. Yeah, it sucked.
And then like covered always afterwards.
So you want to cover until it's like scabbed over, and then you want to let as much air get in there as possible, because in the kitchens we're always like washing our hands and doing stuff. Just wear gloves and make sure you keep it like clean and dry as much as possible. So like the repeated soaking of stuff will cause the scabs to come off more easily, so it kind of tends to bleed again a lot more quickly. And especially with all the hand washing soapy stuff, like our skin gets so fucked up. Like we need like constant moisturizer. Yeah. Cool? Cool. Yeah, sweet. Wound seal though, it's like, I swear to God, it's magic. Like if you've ever had like gushing blood out of something, you're just like boom, boom, boom. It's it stops like
How
instantly.
do you get the vet food from my ivermectin guy?
Perfect. Yeah, this relates well to our discussions earlier. Yeah. Also, I mean, like Bezos might be your ivermectin guy, so
Yeah, he
who
is.
knows? Yeah. This is great. All right. Because we have such a lovely political situation in the world right now. It's awesome. Yeah.
Let's go to space.
Oh man.
Knife-sharpening.
Yeah. So, single bevel stuff. Again, I just want to go through the same process. So I showed you on the first side, the upper section, right, and the lower section, all the same kinds of things. We're just adjusting where our pressure is. So when we do the first side, we're going to flip it over to our finishing side, and the knife is going to go flat on the stone. Here, it's going to be perpendicular to the stone, and we're going to apply pressure directly on the shinogi line. And unlike the rest of our sharpening, our pressure is going to be on the edge leading stroke. So pressure, relax, pressure, relax. Some people have pressure both ways. Some people have pressure on the edge trailing stroke. There are a lot of different thoughts about it, but the way that I learned how to do it was to have pressure on the push, and the thought behind it was this. If I apply pressure this way and relax on the edge pulling stroke, the edge trailing stroke is still going to have a lot of like pressure on the spine of the knife, and so that helps keep the front and back at roughly the same size, so I'm not having one side grow larger than the other side. And if I have pressure both ways, the back side tends to get a little bit more pressure in the front, and so you'll see the spine of the knife grow a little bit more. How accurate that is or not, like I've never done any scientific testing of it. Part of it is just like I train with really, really talented dudes, and when they tell me to do shit, like I do it, and then I'll try and figure out like what's going on with it later if they're not able to explain it to me in clear, coherent ways. So pressure, relax, pressure, relax. We go all the way through, coming up to the tip. And when I get to the tip, instead of following the shinogi line here and stopping, I'm going to follow the shinogi line, and then I'm going to run my fingers along the spine as I come up all the way towards the tip. Here, what I'm looking to do is make sure that I have even and consistent contact all the way around. And again, I'll be able to feel the burr form on the front side again. So we would do coarse, coarse, fine, medium, medium, fine, 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 fine. So I'm going to do the fine part really quick. I'm just going to run through it because I want to show you the micro bevel at the end of this as well.
Can I feel the burr again?
Yeah, it's really, really small on this because I'm trying to like blast through it, but I will do one for you in a little bit just so we can be 100% sure. So, same deal. Am I on the right side? Nope. No, I got to do it again. 1 second. Maybe I'll have a burr for you in a second anyways. Really, really small, but go ahead and feel for it. So it's on the back side, yeah? Just catches your fingertips like a little bit there. Cool?
Thank you.
Yep. You need a towel?
I'm fine.
All right. Cool. So now I'm on the right side. So same thing. I'm looking at the scratch pattern here so we can see like how different the scratch pattern is as we go. And it's much more pronounced on wide bevels. You'll really be able to see it cleanly. And the sound is different too. Like finishing stones don't make a lot of noise. Coarser stones make a ton of noise. Medium grit stones are somewhere in the middle. And I've already moved down towards the edge. So you can do it like in the course of just one kind of general motion. And you see that I'm moving like back and forth as I go. You can do it just going in one direction and stop, whatever. It doesn't really matter because we have metrics that we're able to judge, right? We're judging based on like the shinogi line moving up consistently and evenly, and we're judging based on the burr formation being even and consistent. So how we go about achieving that doesn't really matter as much as just being able to make sure that we're measuring in some kind of way what's going on and then responding to that accordingly. Single bevel knives will take you a lot longer in terms of sharpening as well, so you can expect to spend like 30 minutes easily on one knife, or even sometimes longer than that. There's just a lot more surface area contact, and it's a lot of hard steel, and there's just more going on in the sharpening. So don't expect to be done with a single bevel knife in like 5 minutes. Expect that one to take longer. But again, if you're spending like an hour, it's probably too long. So somewhere in like the 30-minute plus or minus a little bit range is probably a pretty appropriate amount of time for a knife like this. And you can see I wasn't like perfectly perpendicular as I did that. That's okay. You just don't want to be like this, right? As close as possible. But sometimes it's just more important to be comfortable in your movement. All right, so now I've gone through both sides. Now I want to apply this micro bevel. I'm just doing that on my very finest stone. So here, where I was sharpening like this before, now I'm going to lift up for a much, much, much higher angle. Like I said, somewhere in the 45-ish degree range. And I'm going to apply light pressure on my edge trailing stroke. Making my tip adjustment. And this is going to form a very, very, very easy to feel burr, right? Now I want to get rid of that. So again, I do this. Some people also use a lateral movement like this to kind of shear the burr away when they're done. It can be effective as well, but you may want to do this just a couple of times. And again, you can use the blue sponge if you'd like, but make sure that you're doing it at least like 1 or 2 times before you do the blue sponge, because otherwise you're going to be like ripping the burr off, and it's not as weak as it could otherwise be. All right, so otherwise, same deal. We're going to check and make sure that it's sharp by using it on food. We can use the thumbnail test. But what's really important is that when you look at the micro bevel, it's literally just like a hairline right there at the very edge. Like it just looks like a thread. You can barely see it. And when it's larger than that, it's not great. You're impacting overall sharpness in a much more substantial way. So it should just be really, 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 really tiny, small enough that when you go through sharpening the next time, you can remove it really, really quickly. You can see it there? It's like just a thread right at the very edge.
Yeah.
Cool. Otherwise, same deal. Thumbnail test would be really effective. You can cut paper and see what that's like. Cut food. Food is the best thing you can do to test and make sure things are going well. The deba is going to require a lot more lifting up and rotating. The usuba will require a lot less of it. There's not as much rotation, but you may still be lifting up a little bit as you go towards the tip. So you guys have like a fish deal with people next door? It's like a fish crack house? Like
Fish deal with the guy next to
yeah.
He bought a fish when Bailey was here. He was like, hey, what's up? Is that kosher? And then he just like bought it on the street. And then he's like, go store it in your fridge.
This is the fucking best. This is the coolest shit that's happened. Yeah. Like, not only is that like the best deal I've ever seen go on, but like,
He's the head of the construction team for next door.
motherfucker, that guy's eating well. That guy's he's living his best life. All right, cool. So, and when we look at this also, you can see that there's not like a distinct upper and lower bevel. I could, if I wanted to, spend a lot more time getting rid of the scratches that you see on here and make it look all nice and pretty. Just short on time today. I want to make sure we get you guys back to work. But you can really spend a lot of time making things look very, very pretty. And there are ways to accentuate, for example, the hard and soft steel. We use like a powder. Some people use like natural stones or finger stones, where it's like harder than the soft steel, but not as hard as the hard steel. And so it scratches them up in different ways, and it creates a really beautiful misty-like finish. Something like this, right? And those are just like aesthetic things that you can do to make shit look cool, but they don't actually impact performance in any kind of like significant way. All right, so I have a few other things that I wanted to touch on. So let me just make sure that I'm getting to everything here. Bear with me here for a second. So we went over the sharpening. We've gone over stone setups, body positioning, grips, hand movements. When you are applying pressure in sharpening, your hands each have different roles. So for example, your right hand is going to be responsible for angles. We talked about the angle of approach and the angle of sharpening. All of that's going to occur in this hand, all right? Your left hand is going to be responsible for pressure and ideally movement. And that's going to sound really weird, but for pressure, not just how much pressure you apply, but where that pressure is applied. We want to make sure our pressure stays over the center line of the stone so it's evenly distributed across the surface of the stone. So we're not applying pressure out here or out here on the edge of the stone, but rather always in the center. So my left hand, you're the lefty? Yeah, right hand will stay in the center of the stone as we go. And as much as possible, you want to use this hand for your back and forth motion. Both of the hands are going to have to be involved with it. But when you start involving this hand a lot more with it, people have a tendency to put a lot of strength into this arm, and they're either pressing down or lifting up, and it makes them not planar with the surface of the stone. So not only does applying pressure here keep you planar with the surface of the stone, but focusing on having your movement be based in this arm will also help you be more planar with the surface of the stone to achieve more consistent results as you go. So where you apply pressure also does matter. All right. Finger placement. Crawling. Cool. All right. If you notice that the burr is weak in one area and strong in another area, instead of just doing the areas where it was weak a little bit more, do the entire blade again, focusing more on the areas that were weak and less on the areas that are strong. If you just try and pick the places that you're trying to fix, you're going to have a great tendency to not be at the exact same angle that you were through the course of that sharpening. You end up with a weird faceted bevel. So by doing the entire thing over again, you can mitigate that as a result. You also want to find like good lighting situations for what you're doing, so you can look at it and you can see, like, does it look like a smooth, flat, even plane, or do I see a lot of different ridges and facets and bevels? How consistent is that stuff looking? So natural light is the best. The long tube horizontal lights, if you can get them kind of parallel to what you're doing, can also be really helpful. But utilize lights and try and utilize like a number of different angles as you look at things to give you the best perspective of what's going on. You don't want to have very rounded things. You don't want a lot of faceting as you go. Make sure that you check your work frequently. Don't speed through sharpening. I sharpen really quickly. I've also been sharpening probably as long as some of you guys have been alive, which is a horrible fucking idea for me to think about, but it's true. Work slow. Like, work slow, work methodical, be consistent. And as you get consistent, you can speed up. But don't focus on speed. Also, don't be like a fucking snail. It gets really awkward when you're going like super slow. You make a lot of mistakes. So find a pace that's comfortable for you. I use music. I think music is the best part of sharpening. You find a music that's like a good pace for whatever you're doing. You just kind of stay with the rhythm. I listen to a lot of merengue. There's a lot of like just general booty music that works well for me. You find whatever works well for it. Seriously, my guys hate me so much for it because it's like, you know, Megan Thee Stallion, like Yuki Chiba right now. Like, it's not even good music. It just has the right pace. It's like a good jogging playlist, K-pop workout playlist. What the fuck is wrong with me? All right, so talked about looking at the scratch patterns. Sweet. Talked about all the different tests. Angle too high, angle too low. Okay, so some of you guys have carbon steel knives, right? And carbon steel knives can be prone to rust and reactivity with acidic foods. You see oxidation. Rust is really, really, really easy to avoid. When you are done using your knife, make sure that shit is clean and dry. Like, literally, when it's not in your hand being used to cut shit, clean and dry. If you're going to store it for longer than like a day, or you live in a really humid area, give it a light coating of oil. There are 2 oils that are okay. Fuck everything else. Mineral oil is the cheap, awesome option that is abundantly available. You can get it at any CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. It's in the laxative aisle. Don't use a lot of it. Camellia oil is the other one that is traditionally used, and it's what you'll see people do like on, you know, katanas and other stuff like that. And it's supposed to have some antimicrobial properties. Whatever. You don't want animal fats. You don't want oil, vegetable oils will go rancid. Don't slather your knife with bacon grease or duck fat. Smells awesome for like a day. Fucking horrible after that. So clean and dry when it's not in your hand cutting stuff. In terms of oxidation, we've seen some shit, man. Like, just imagine like people come in and there's like fucking like dried raw chicken and like bacon fat like on a knife, and you're like, what the fuck were you thinking? All right, so mitigating oxidation while using it is a little bit trickier. Because there's no oxidized steel on the surface normally, like when the steel is fresh and clean, the steel is prone to oxidation. There's no chromium in it. Chromium forms chromium oxide, which inhibits oxidation on stainless knives. In fact, specifically above somewhere between 11 and 13% chromium will create chromium oxide that stops those knives from being as reactive, and that's what makes stainless steel. The higher the amount of chromium, the more stainless it is. Oxidation occurs both while you're cutting things, and especially acidic things or things with moisture, but it also occurs long after you're done. So, like, say you cut shit with your knife and you clean it and dry it and you put it away, it's still going to continue to oxidize long after you're done cutting. There are 2 kinds of oxidation. There's rust, which is a corrosive kind of oxidation. You want to get rid of it right away because it's not chemically stable, so it continues to eat away at the blade, ergo corrosive. And then non-corrosive oxidation, which is patina, and that's just simple discoloring. So rust is red, patina is any other color, like blue, black, gray, whatever. It's not damaging for your knife. If you don't like the way it looks, you can always clean it off. So while you're working, the way you're going to work is also going to make a big difference. You're going to keep a damp towel in the lower right-hand corner of your work towel and a dry towel nearby. Health department is not cool with damp towels on your cutting board, so keep a sandy bucket nearby so that you can always be cleaning stuff. You should be cleaning stuff anyways. And also, If you can, use paper towels instead of actual towels so that you can cycle them through a little bit more frequently so you don't have like cross-contamination with stuff. Just work clean, right? As you're cutting, cut, 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 wipe, wipe, cut, 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 wipe, wipe. The more acidic the food, the more frequently you wipe off, which will help you mitigate the buildup of acidic food on the blade. When you're done, wipe it clean, wipe it dry, right? That's the workflow. If you don't mind the way patina looks on your knife, let it build up. Your knife will become less reactive the more the patina builds up because there's now oxidized steel on the surface. So there's less free steel to oxidize with the acidic foods that you're doing. If you hate the way patina looks, like I fucking hate it, I think it looks disgusting, especially in open kitchen environments where people can see what I'm doing, I'm constantly polishing that shit off. So I think it's behind you over here, I use metal polishes for that kind of stuff. Flitz is the kind of metal polish that I use. There are a number of them. Semi-chrome, Adams No. 2, Mother's Mag, Cape Cod polish, whatever. They're really cool because they don't rely on abrasive as much as they do chemical reactivity to get rid of the patina. You take this and like a little cotton pad and a paper towel, and you'll lie the knife down on the paper towel. Rotate it so the edge faces into the paper towel so you don't cut yourself, and you just get some elbow grease, like a little bit of this, and just rub the shit out of it. You can go through a few when you're done, wipe it all off, clean it off. This will get rid of light rust and patina and will keep things nice and shiny. If you have mirror polish knives, this is much nicer than a rust eraser. The rust erasers are like little pieces of rubber with abrasive in them, like sandpaper. They're also really good for getting rid of patina, but they scratch your knife. If this is not aggressive enough, then you move into abrasive means like rust erasers or sandpaper. But usually this stuff is what I would choose to be the most effective with it. In terms of food, food oxidizes also when you're done cutting. So if you see onions, they're going to turn brown or black, and they're going to start to taste and smell metallic. Same for like pineapple, mango. The more acidic the food, the more frequently you see that kind of stuff. If you're cutting just a fuck ton of acidic food, use a stainless knife. Like, do yourself a favor. If you cut some acidic food and you're using it right away, no stress. If you're not using it right away and you can rinse it off before you store it. That will help slow down the oxidation process. If you cannot rinse it off, keep it as cold as possible until you're using it, again, just to slow down the oxidation process as you go. You don't want those off flavors, colors, smells in your food. So get used to paying attention to that. Like, look at things, smell things, really like be mindful of that kind of stuff. So that's the way that we'll deal with carbon steel and managing all that kind of stuff, the corrosive, non-corrosive, and all the color, taste, and smell change that you see with foods. Cool, sweet. If you see a lot of corrosive stuff, like if the rust is really set in, there may be pitting underneath the blade, and that needs to be removed with like a really serious abrasive, so that sometimes can require machinery or heavy equipment to do. Please don't let your knives get fucked up like that. Like, it really is just wasteful. We have to remove a lot of metal to get rid of that kind of stuff. Okay, so handle and saya care. The handles of knives, especially Japanese knives, are untreated natural woods. They dry out over time, especially when you're washing them a lot with soap and water. It's important to replace the oils of the wood, and so usually we will use mineral oil for that kind of stuff. Same oil that you would use to oil your knife. I actually like a mixture of beeswax and mineral oil, so if you want to make that, it's 1 part beeswax to 3 to 4 parts mineral oil, and it will set in and be more like a paste than just like a liquid that's goopy all over everything. Anytime your handle or the outside of your saya starts to look or feel a little bit dry, take a little bit, wipe it on, wipe it off. If you want it to set in a little bit more deeply, you can warm stuff up. Like if you put the handle or saya in like a really low temp oven, like no more than 200 degrees, maybe like 180 to 200 degrees, check the temp because ovens are always off. Like, don't be over 200. You can warm everything up, and then when you apply this stuff, it will soak in a little bit more deeply, so it's a little bit longer in between the times that you have to do that kind of stuff. Same deal with wood cutting boards. When they start to look or feel dry, mineral oil, beeswax mix goes a long way. Wipe off any excess. Make sure your hands aren't all slippery when you're using stuff. Cool. Chip repairs. If you have a chip in your knife, you have a couple of different ways that you can deal with that. One, you can just go through the normal sharpening process that we talked about until the chip is gone, right? If they're small, that's probably the easiest way to do it. If they are large chips, you have to do it a little bit differently. And so what you would do in that case is you would find your coarsest stone, and you would rub the edge of the knife along the stone like this at a really high angle until the profile is the way that you want it and until the chips are gone. Then, if you look at it and you decide, shit, that was a lot of metal, I need to thin my blade, then you would go through the thinning process, and then you would go through the sharpening. If it's not too much metal, what you're going to do is start sharpening. But because you flattened out the edge, you will have this flat plane here that you can use as a reference guide. You're going to sharpen on both sides until it's an even and consistent thickness all the way through, and then watch it get smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears and you have a burr. That will help you do an even and consistent job with that kind of stuff.
For now, just go to Japanese knife imports.
We can also do that for you really quickly. But you should know about this stuff, right? It does take a long time. We're much faster. So that is the main way that you would deal with more major chipping. And yeah, all right, cool. Any questions about anything? Any issues that you guys are having specifically? Knives you want me to take a look at? Anything else that we can go over before I get out of your hair and let you guys get back to service?
Does anybody have a chip or a knife?
Yeah, I'm sure like most people's questions are pertinent to everyone. So lay it on me. Let's see what you got.
I had a chip. I got rid of it, and now my edge is like, woo. What am I to do?
Exactly what I just said. So if your edge is all wavy and wonky, that means that when you were trying to repair the chip, you spent a lot more time sharpening in one area than the rest of it, and that's the burr too big in one area problem. And the way that you would solve that is this reprofiling move that I just talked about. So you would go through and you would reprofile. Now what you'll see is because your edge is all wonky and wavy like that, the parts that stick out further, closer to the cutting board, right, they're going to be much wider flat spots than the spot that dips in, which is going to be a much more narrow flat spot, right? So as you go through and you reprofile it, as you're sharpening, you're going to bring all those parts down closer and closer together until that one strip of flat is the same thickness all the way through, and then you can continue with your sharpening process. But that's how you would deal with the reprofiling. That's how you would deal with a bird's beak tip if you developed it, or like a frown or a heel that sticks out a little bit more. It's that process of reprofiling, and you'll then have to make a determination, did I do enough that requires me to thin it or not? And you are more than welcome to bring it over to the shop and like use our equipment and, you know, like have us be there to kind of check on your work as you do it. Like it's always been an offer, so feel free to do that. Cool. Other questions? What's up?
Do you have any advice for sharpening flexible knives? I have trouble having.
Yeah, no, flexible knives are tricky. Flexible knives require less pressure. You have to rely on angle consistency so much more than pressure in general. Is this a flexible one? It's not that flexible. No, you know, like some are all super whippy, and those are tricky, and especially as you get towards the tip, because as you move further away, the amount of leverage that you have from the handle increases, right? But the gist of it is this: you're just going to have to be really careful about the amount of pressure. Like you can see here, if I'm applying some downward pressure here, it's going to flex, and that's going to bring the tip up, and it's going to bring this part where I'm applying pressure down. So by making sure that this arm is loose and relaxed, and that I just use this hand to make sure that I'm controlling where my pressure is, I can alleviate issues with that, but it's overall going to be a lighter pressure game that is going to take you a little bit more time. You're just going to have to focus on angle consistency as opposed to strength to get you through it. Yeah? Cool. And same for like the ones where like the tip curves up quite a bit, like German knives, the tip comes up a little bit, or like fillet knives or boning knives, like Wusthof Henkel ones, where they have a little bit of flex. Those are tricky too, because you have to like come around this way to get up for the tip. And so a visualization that I like for that kind of stuff is, you know how when you spin a coin around and then it starts to do like this kind of movement? If you just imagine that your edge, your blade is like attached to one part of that, you can use that kind of motion as you're working through the tip. You kind of get what I'm going at there? Does anyone have like a quarter or something? Like any kind of round thing? Can I use like the top of a deli cup? Do you have a...
We have like one quarter in the cash drawer.
Just one?
Just one.
Yeah, let me just grab the top of a deli cup really quick. Sorry. All right, so you spin your coin, it goes like this, and then all of a sudden it starts doing this thing.
Yes.
Right? So now we imagine that our knife is this. And we're using that kind of visualization to allow us to kind of follow up as we go towards the tip. I like, it may work for you, it may not work for you, but that's the way that I visualize it, and that's the way that I found it easiest to think about while I'm doing that. I do think that as you go through sharpening, like having clear mental images, being able to visualize stuff, really helps out a lot. So that's why like we went over all this stuff so you have good ideas of fundamental concepts, because that allows you to have a greater mental image of what's going on when you're doing stuff, ergo ideally achieving better results. So hopefully it works for you. That is what works for me. Cool? All right. Any other questions? Anything else you guys want to go over? Anything that you think that I've missed? I don't know. We tried to get a lot in there really quick.
Oh my God. When you're sharpening before stripping,
Yeah.
The burr flex off.
Happens sometimes.
Is it just too much pressure, or is it just...
No. So sometimes that just happens, especially when your burrs are really, really, really large. As you're sharpening, like sometimes you'll see them come off. In fact, sometimes they'll come off in like perfect little like curly cues, like a pigtail type thing. It's totally fine. If you see the edge crumbling, that's a different thing. But if you just see like parts of the burr flaking off, cool. Like it's already doing your job for you. You still want to go through the process of burr removal, making sure everything is like clean and consistent. But sometimes large burrs will come off a little bit more quickly than small burrs. Small burrs can be really tenacious. And some steels hold onto burrs much more than other steels. So for example, like Ginsanko is a Japanese steel that is tenaciously difficult to deburr. And so you'll spend much more time in the stropping motion. And you also want to be aware as you're doing the stropping motion that you are angle consistent with what you were doing before, because it's very easy to round over things. And those kind of rounded over edges do not cut well. You want nice, clean, planar edges. We have a USB microscope at work, so if you ever want to come and see like what your edges look like we can do that under extremely gross magnification, and it will be very demoralizing. So, yeah. Cool? Cool. Todo bien? Sweet? Lovely. Awesome. All right. We'll get you guys back into functional service. Yeah.